Chapter 570. Secondly, it is to disperse the murderous aura on your body. With this kind of murderous aura, if you want to assassinate others, it is simply courting death. Experts can sense this kind of murderous aura. So, a successful assassin will always look more ordinary than an ordinary person. Those who have a murderous look on their faces are mostly small characters that are not worth mentioning. My way of releasing pressure and adjusting my murderous aura is different from other assassins. I do it according to my own temperament, whether it is frivolous or frivolous. In short, as long as I can release it, then it is a successful balance. There is no specific method. A specific method of releasing pressure is also a flaw for an assassin, a fatal flaw. So, an assassin who can be seen as an assassin with one look is no different from an idiot. And those who think that an assassin should have a cold face and a rigid look are a bunch of idiots. Furthermore, he's a brainless idiot. June Moxie smiled, but I believe that when I don't kill, no one will recognize me as an assassin, and a super assassin at that. In this aspect, I think I am successful. And this foundation is that I am usually relaxed, frivolous, and frivolous. Do you understand now? I don't understand, and I don't understand even more. Mei Xuan frowned. The murderous aura and the principles of an assassin, I can understand them all, but the only thing I don't understand is, how can you be an assassin? And a super assassin? Why do you always put yourself in the perspective of an assassin? You are obviously a young master of an aristocratic family, and you are only 18 years old this year. Everyone has seen your past. How can you relate to being an assassin? June Mo Xia was left speechless for a while. I had been so happy a moment ago that I had actually neglected this point. How could he explain this? I have killed people. Isn't that an assassin? June Moxie argued irrationally, and then immediately changed the topic. Shui Yan, in your opinion, should we rush at full speed? Or should he take his time? If we rush at full speed, we should be able to surpass Xiao Weicheng and the others. If we slow down, I'm afraid they will overtake us. At that time, how should we deal with it? Mei Xuan rolled her eyes at him. She knew that he was trying to change the topic, but she did not expose him. She simply said, this time, the Great Golden City has suffered a great loss. According to the situation where they are fighting openly and secretly, they should not inform the next group of people about the real situation. They might even mislead them. Isn't that even better? Isn't that our chance? June Moxie smiled thoughtfully. Opportunity? What opportunity? Mei Xuan was smart. She immediately understood June Dashao's meaning and said, you mean, pretending to be injured? Yeah, pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger is the true way of the king. June Mo Xia said in a serious tone. Dealing a fatal blow to the enemy while they are still in a state of surprise is a great achievement. Ha, you humans are too cunning. Mei Xuan laughed. This was another mountain pass. Although it was not very steep, it was the only way. This was undoubtedly another perfect place for an ambush. At this moment, the leader of Hermitage, Ning Wuqing, was standing at the entrance of the valley. His white robe was the same color as the snowfield. His long beard fluttered in the wind. He looked like he was going to ride the wind. His face was full of righteousness and he looked like an immortal. Behind him, 28 top experts were divided into 2 rows, sitting quietly behind the mountain rocks. They did not hide their tracks. They only used the mountain rocks to cover their bodies. It was impossible to hide from the divine senses of the experts. It was as if they were hiding from the wind. When he thought of Xiao Weicheng who had just walked past this place, Ning Wuqing wanted to laugh at his misfortune. There were 30 people from Great Golden City, 30 top experts. After the battle, there were only 13 left. Moreover, the leader, Xiao Weicheng, seemed to be seriously injured. Although he tried his best to hide it, Ning Wuqing could see from his pale face that the battle was tragic. The more miserable the better. This was really satisfying. Let's see how you are going to show off. When you are miserable, we can take advantage of you. Ning Wuqing said that he was concerned, but in fact, he was asking about the battle. Xiao Weiqing said angrily, "You will understand when you see Venerable Mei. I wish you success in this battle." Then, he led his people and left in a hurry. Ning Wuqing felt great in his heart. Do I have to see Venerable Mei to understand? Now, it is very clear. You've lost more than half of your men. Even if Venerable Mei's skills are exceedingly high, it's impossible for her to achieve such a result without suffering any injuries. Moreover, the injuries will be very serious. 5 Supreme-level experts were sacrificed, and 10 Supreme-level experts were killed. Even the 3 stars King-level expert, Xiao Weiqing, was seriously injured. If such a huge price was not paid in exchange for Mei Shuiyan's serious injuries, there would be no justice and it would be the biggest joke in the world. Back then, the 10 of us almost killed her. Not to mention now. We have rested and built up our strength. Venerable Mei is seriously injured, weak and exhausted. Therefore, after Ning Wuqing surveyed the terrain, he felt that there was no point in setting up an ambush. Moreover, it would be a loss of Hermitage's magnanimous demeanor. This place isn't small. So, there are plenty of opportunities to dodge and move around. We only need to set up an ambush until Venerable Mei arrives. I presume that she is seriously injured. Ha ha ha. Won't such a peerless skill fall into my hands? No wonder Xiao Weiqing looked at me in such a strange way before he left. So, it was jealousy. Therefore, Ning Wuqing was very relieved. After all, there was no longer anything to worry about. I can successfully kill Venerable Mei under my command, then, it won't matter if Half-Body dies or doesn't die. In fact, it will be one less target for me to fight for. The heavens are helping me. 2 figures slowly approached from afar. Mei Shuiyan and Jun Moxie were getting closer and closer. Ning Wuqing waved his hand, and everyone concealed themselves. Then, Ning Wuqing stood firmly behind a rock. Lang Lang looked at the 2 people who had just arrived. She carefully observed them, and the corners of her mouth curled into a smile. Jun Moxie hadn't been injured. This was obvious. After all, how could a great master like Jun Moxie, who was so weak, enter his eyes? However, he had a good master. So, no one would dare to touch a single hair on his head. Mei Shuiyan seemed normal at first glance. She didn't have the slightest injury on her body. Even her clothes were as white as snow. Her complexion was rosy. However, Jun Moxie was looking at her from time to time with a concerned look on his face. It seemed as if he was very worried. In fact, it could be seen that Jun Moxie was deliberately slowing down his pace. This is reasonable. With Mei Shuiyan's status, she wouldn't lose her composure no matter how heavily injured she was. This is the pride of a great master, and it can't be changed. If Mei Shuiyan had come with her clothes in tatters, her face pale, and her body full of injuries, Ning Wuqing would have suspected that her injuries were fake. Ning Wuqing would only believe that under such calmness, his own sharp eyes could find a flaw in it. This woman who has been awe-inspiring for a lifetime is really injured at this moment. If she wasn't injured, if she didn't suffer any serious injuries, with Mei Shuiyan's strength, Jun Moxie wouldn't have been worried about her. Ning Wuqing's heart is finally at ease. The 2 of them had arrived at the mountain pass. Venerable Mei, we meet again. It's been a while. How are you? Ning Wuqing laughed out loud. His white robe fluttered in the wind as he stood on top of the mountain rock. His sharp eyes were smiling as he looked at the man and woman who were a few feet away from him. It was as if everything was under his control. Jun Moxie and Mei Shuiyan suddenly stopped. Mei Shuiyan looked at Ning Wuqing and smiled. Ning Wuqing. You're really like a ghost that won't go away. Do you really think that I can't bear to kill you forever? The war for seizing the heavens is indeed a protective talisman. But this talisman also has its limits. Venerable Mei Xian's skills are unparalleled, and his heart is vicious. I don't have any friendship with Venerable Mei. Venerable Mei will naturally be willing to kill me. I don't think I'll get lucky. Ning Wuching chuckled. He looked at Jun Moxie, who had a worried look on his face. He shook his head and said, "But if Venerable Mei is so confident, why is your little lover so uneasy? Could it be? Venerable Mei, you're injured." Then, he said, "It's no wonder. The Supreme Golden City lost 17 experts in one go. I guess Venerable Mei is not having it easy, right? But, you can actually kill 17 top experts in one go. This kind of peerless skill is really admirable. I can't catch up to you." Jun Moxie's face was full of worry and anger. He stepped forward and looked impulsive. He gritted his teeth and pointed at Ning Wuching and shouted, "The Supreme Golden City is despicable and shameless. They actually hid in the snowfield and plotted against Shuaiyan. Unfortunately, they've harmed themselves in the end. Karma is not good. They finally returned in defeat. Ning Wuching, don't tell me that you, with the name of hermitage and the prestige of a superior supreme, want to take advantage of others when they're in danger? Young Master Jun, you don't know. I didn't take advantage of others when they're in danger." Ning Wuching said warmly, "I'm just taking advantage of beasts when they're in danger." He looked at Jun Imo Xia with some pity in his eyes. Then, he said in a soft voice, "Young Master Jun, you mustn't forget that this stunning beauty in front of you is a wild beast. Young Master Jun is a famous teacher and your future is limitless. But, you're so captivated by beauty. It really makes me sigh." Jun Moxie was so anxious that his face turned red. He stepped in front of Mei Shuiyan and opened his arms. He said angrily, "No matter what you say, no means no. If you have the guts, kill me first." Chapter 571. Fourth update. Mei Shuiyan looked around and smiled faintly, "It's still those people. Ning Wuching, you haven't asked for help. You think you can stop this venerable with just these people? Isn't that a little too whimsical?" Ning Wuching replied in a calm manner, "These people might not be enough in normal times. But, they should be enough now. Venerable Mei, I'm sure you won't deny what I said." He turned his head and looked at Jun Moxie. Then, he spoke in a gentle manner, "Young Master Jun, this old man was in your good graces that day at the aristocratic hall. So, I owe you a big favor. So, I took a bone-tempering pill first. And, your master also gave us a way out in the Jun family. He didn't attack us. I will always remember this friendship. And, we, the Hermitage, have never wanted to become enemies with your master. So, I have a few words from the bottom of my heart. I wonder if the young Master Jun is interested in listening to them." "What words?" Jun Moxie looked at him vigilantly. Then, he said nervously, "Speak." He looked like an extremely nervous young man. He wanted to protect his lover at all costs. In fact, he looked so real that even Mei Shuiyan almost burst out laughing. This guy is a genius. He can act like a dragon and act like a tiger. He's really good. The young master is handsome and elegant. Your family background is rich. Your Tian Xiang's noble title is hereditary. Your status in the Jianghu is that of a super family. There's no need to doubt this. Your future prospects are boundless. You will become a dragon among men once your wings are fully grown. You will soar to the sky." Ning Wuching spoke in a tone of deep regret. Then, he continued in a sincere manner, "If the young master wishes to find a good wife, there are many beauties in this world. They can come and go as you wish. But, why would the young master waste his youth for a Xian beast that isn't of our race? You should know that humans and beasts walk different paths, and in the end, there won't be a good ending. Don't look at this woman's fairy-like appearance, but in the end, she's still a profound beast." "What do you mean?" Jun Moxie was puzzled. "Can't I marry her? Is it a sin for me to marry her?" "It's not just a sin, young Master Jun has let down the Jun family's ancestors." Ning Wuching said earnestly, "Young Master Jun, for the past 10,000 years, there have been many Xian beasts who have taken human form. But has young master ever heard of any Xian beast marrying a human? That's true. However, just because they didn't exist in the past didn't mean that they didn't exist now, and it didn't mean that they wouldn't exist in the future. In this world, there are only things that you can't think of, but there is nothing that you can't do. Man can conquer nature. Jun Moxie raised his eyebrows. Let me be the first in history, what's wrong with that? This isn't a question of whether it's possible or not, it's a question of one's own bloodline. Ning Wuqing said solemnly, you should know that when humans become husband and wife, they will naturally give birth to children. When Xian beasts form a pair, they will also give birth to little Xian beasts. This is the law of heaven and earth, and cannot be changed. But when humans and Xian beasts become husband and wife, will they give birth to children? Or will they give birth to a Xian beast? It's true that Venerable Mei has already transformed into a human, and is even more charming and enchanting. I believe that there are very few people in this world who can resist her seductive charm. But young Master Jun must not forget that even if she were to cultivate for another 30,000 years, she would still be a wild beast in her bones, and absolutely not a human. The offspring she gives birth to can only be Xian beasts, and not normal babies. Such a demoness, why not get rid of her as soon as possible? What's the point of keeping her around? Mei Shuyan's expression changed drastically. Her face turned paler than the snow. Her delicate body also started to tremble slightly. Ning Wuqing's original intention of saying those words was to separate the two of them, and to further attack Mei Shuyan. But he did not realize that his words, whether intentionally or unintentionally, had touched upon the thing that Mei Shuyan was most worried about, the thing that she was most afraid of. Even though she knew that his intention was to sow discord, to separate the two of them, and to attack Mei Shuyan, but Mei Shuyan was still shocked. Ning Wuqing himself had suffered from a broken heart in love, and had been alone his entire life. But he deeply understood the word love, and it was a very harmful thing. Mei Shuyan had trained hard for hundreds of years, and had never had the slightest thought of love. It could be said that her heart was as calm as still water. But the more a person was like that, once they fell in love, there was no cure. As the saying goes, when an old house is on fire, there is no cure. If Ning Wuqing could persuade Jun Moxie to leave Mei Shuyan, then whether Mei Shuyan was injured or not, she would inevitably lose her rationality, and lose her mind. Her fighting strength would also drop, and she might even die without a fight. Not to mention that she was seriously injured. Ning Wuqing Lengleng looked at the change in Mei Shuyan's expression, and was overjoyed. He knew that he had touched her sore spot. Do you have anything else to say? Jun Moxie's expression calmed down, and he looked coldly at Ning Wuqing, his hands behind his back, and his voice became emotionless. As the saying goes, honest advice is unpleasant to the ear. I know that young Master Jun doesn't like to hear it, but I have no choice but to say it. Young Master Jun, you must consider it carefully. You must know that the Jun family has a good reputation, and is considered a heroic family in Tianxiang. If people were to find out that their only descendant married a Xian beast as a wife, it would inevitably become a big joke. Or, what's even more frightening is that after a year and a half, if the Jun family succeeds in giving birth to a child, then that's fine. But if they give birth to a little fox or a little tiger, then the Jun family's reputation will be greatly damaged, and they will be disgraced. Young Master Jun, how will you face the Jun family's ancestors if that happens? Ning Wuqing looked at Jun Moxie with a pained expression, and it seemed as if he could already see the embarrassing situation that the Jun family would face. He sighed and said, there are 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants is the worst. Young Master Jun, you must think thrice before you act. If you insist on doing things your own way, and you end up becoming a huge joke. Young Master Jun, it is not that this Ning's words are too harsh, but this Ning is wholeheartedly thinking for young Master's sake. Let me ask you, if young Master were to take this Xian beast as your wife, what is the difference between that and your own dogs and cats? You mean? I need the approval of the 3 holy lands to marry whoever I want. Jun Moxie looked at Ning Wuqing in a cynical manner. Ning Wuqing, have you gone senile? Ning Wuching didn't get angry. Instead, he sighed bitterly and said, "Again, honest advice is unpleasant to the ear. I'm thinking for the young master, I'm thinking for the Jun family's future. This old man's sincerity can be witnessed by the heavens and the earth. The young master may not understand it now, and may even be extremely disgusted by it. But, you'll certainly understand this old man's painstaking efforts in the future." Mei Xuan's body started to tremble. She looked at Jun Moxie with a pair of distressed eyes. Her eyes had already become somewhat hazy. Ning Wuching's words had undoubtedly dealt a fatal blow to Mei Xuan. She could even feel her heart shattering bit by bit. Her lover was slowly drifting further and further away. From the time Ning Wuching had spoken these words, his ice-cold expression, and the stiff expression on Jun Moxie's face, Mei Xuan had felt sincere despair. Bearing children was a wonderful thing in the world. But, if the child was a Xian beast? This was something that no family in the world could accept. This was simply an absurd and bizarre story. How could the Jun family and Jun Moxie be an exception? Before this, he was only infatuated with her appearance, and that warm feeling between the two of them. But, once he understood the future of this matter, it was inevitable that Jun Moxie would make a different choice. If he made the so-called rational choice, then, Mei Xuan felt her entire body turn cold. She stood there, but it was as if she was the only person in the world.
There was no hope, no one to rely on. This is still not my world. I'm still a Xian beast. I'd better return to the Tianfa forest. This once sweet and tender feeling, no matter how much I hate to part with it, ultimately does not belong to me. Mei Xuan's mind was in a daze. Suddenly, her mind went blank, and she lost all her guard. Jun Moxie suddenly laughed and said, "Ning Wuching, what you said is indeed correct. What you said makes me even more tempted." Mei Xuan's beautiful eyes widened as she looked at him in shock. Was he going to make his stance clear just like that? She could only hear Ning Wuching's gratified voice, "Young Master Jun, to be able to turn back from the wrong path, it is truly admirable." Jun Mo Xie shook his head and said mockingly, "Your words are extremely sincere, and I believe that it's enough to move many people. It's a pity that you still don't understand this young master's character." He slowly took 2 steps back and gently reached out his hand to embrace Mei Xuan's trembling body. He hugged her tightly and said in a low voice, "How dare you not believe in your husband? After this matter is over, you will be punished according to the family rules." His words were spoken very quickly, and there was a hint of fierceness in his tone. However, Mei Xuan's body suddenly trembled, and her heart was filled with vitality again. Then, she snuggled into the man's warm embrace. She felt that her heart was clear, and her messy thoughts seemed to have been straightened out in an instant. This embrace was still as warm as ever. Tears suddenly flowed down her cheeks, like pearls from a broken necklace. Her heart was still trembling with fear, as if her heart was still trembling with fear and pain. Jun Moxie gently held Mei Xuan's slender waist and turned to look at Ning Wuching. Lengling said, "You are not the only one who knows about this problem. Do you think I don't? I have been thinking about this problem for a long time. But today, thanks to your straightforwardness, it has enlightened me. It has made me finally make up my mind." Jun Moxie looked affectionately at Mei Xuan in his arms. He then raised his head and said resolutely, "I am a vagabond, a wastrel who is rotten to the core. The opinions of the world, to me, are nothing more than dog's fart. What I, Jun Moxie, value is never people, nor Xian beasts, nor beauty, nor wisdom, nor strength."
Chapter 572. Ning Wuching's face was ashen and his eyes were spitting fire. "Jun Moxie, you are really stubborn. You will regret it one day. A man marrying a beast is the biggest joke in the world and will ruin the great Tang. It seems that the Jun family's name will become infamous throughout the world in the future. This matter is set in stone. Even if the Jun family stinks and falls, even if I really give birth to a Xian beast. Ning Wuching, what does that have to do with you? June Moxie glared at him and said with some bewilderment, Ning Wuching, you are neither my son nor my grandson. What are you worrying about? Are you even qualified to worry about it? I am really curious. You guys don't do your proper business and instead come to meddle in my family's affairs. Are you so damn bored that your balls hurt? Ning Wuching's body trembled and he suddenly roared, you are really infuriating this old man. Oh, I know, I understand. Ning Wuching, is it because your wife is dead and you are single for the rest of your life? Do you want others to be single for the rest of their lives? June Moxie said sharply, but there are still many normal people in this world. Everyone wants to hug their wife to sleep and snuggle into the warm bed. There are definitely not many people like you who refuse to find a wife and go to the brothel to earn money. Ning Wuching, you still have the face to talk to me about being unfilial and not having a descendant. Even if I give birth to a Xian beast after my marriage with Shui Yan, it will still have the surname June. But what about you? After you die, will there still be someone with the surname Ning? How miserable! It will be very difficult to find a Xian beast to bury for you. Ning Wuching was so angered by June Imosie's words that his hands and feet were trembling, his face was ashen, and his eyes seemed to be particularly wild. June Moxie was still holding Mei Shuiyan's waist. He lowered his head and pinched her little nose lovingly. He smiled softly and said, Wife, did I enjoy scolding this old thing? Do you feel like you've vented your anger? If you think it's not enough, I'll continue scolding. This is your husband's forte. Even if I'm not number one in the world, I'm still in the top 3. Mei Shuiyan smiled gently with tears in her eyes. She leaned her little head against his chest and drew circles with her slender fingers. She said softly, Are you speaking the truth? June Moxie said seriously, If there is any lie in my words, may the heavens strike me with lightning. 10,000 swords will pierce through your body, and you will die a horrible death. Before he could finish, his mouth was covered by a small hand that emitted a sweet fragrance. He looked down and saw Mei Shuiyan's beautiful eyes filled with tears. Her 2 big eyes stared deeply at him through the tears. She said word by word, I believe you. June Moxie smiled slightly and finally relaxed. He put his forehead against Mei Shuiyan's smooth forehead and said gently, If you believe me, then I am really not afraid of anything. God knows how terrible your face was just now and how much pain I felt. If you leave me, I really can't live anymore. Without you, what is the meaning of life? June Moxie sensitively felt that Ning Wuching's words had left an indelible shadow in Mei Shuiyan's heart. Therefore, he did not hesitate to use his own life to dispel Mei Shuiyan's worries. Although it was a bit mushy, but women were willing to listen to it, Mei Shuiyan choked and her tears fell like pearls, soaking June Moxie's shirt. She sobbed and said, I won't leave you. June Moxie felt relieved and lowered his head to kiss her forehead. Mei Shuiyan's body trembled. She raised her head and looked at June Moxie. She smiled with tears in her eyes. They were surrounded by strong enemies. This pair of children were actually in the midst of strong enemies. They were deeply in love with each other, as if there was no one else around. Ning Wuching finally regained his breath and roared, What a pair of shameless and ungrateful bastards. Everyone, let's get rid of this pair of evildoers. June Moxie hugged Mei Shuiyan and whispered into her ear, Wifey, how are you now? If you haven't completely calmed down, you can watch from the side. Watch how your husband fights these clowns. Don't force yourself. Mei Shuiyan looked at him with a smile and said, I'm not that weak. As long as you don't change, how can I be defeated by others? If you fight alone, I can't be at ease. When she said the last sentence, she couldn't help but lower her head shyly. June Moxie laughed out loud. He heard the whistling sound behind him and the sound of blades cutting through the air. The 2 of them looked at each other and smiled. 2 white figures turned around at the same time. 2 dazzling lights suddenly lit up. Mei Shuiyan's sword of the king and June Moxie's blood of yellow flame were unsheathed at the same time. Dense sword chi soared into the sky. Ding ding ding. After a series of crisp sounds, the sword light dimmed and brightened again. June Moxie's white figure suddenly disappeared in the dazzling sword light. When the sword light dissipated, June Moxie was nowhere to be seen. Mei Shuiyan's figure was like lightning. She was actually able to find the only gap in the frenzied attacks of the swords and sabers and easily slip past them. She was like a wisp of invisible wind. Even if she occasionally came into contact with the sabers and swords that were slashing towards her, she would still be able to easily slip past the sharp edges of the blades. However, the king's sword in her hand was not gentle at all. These top experts of the elusive world of immortals had been playing with swords for their entire lives. Each of them was an expert in this field. Moreover, they had already learned that Mei Shuiyan's sword was a rare divine weapon in the world. At that time, several of them had suffered great losses. Not only were their weapons broken, but they had also lost an arm. This caused a sharp decline in their combat power. Until now, they had not been able to recover. Their strength had been reduced by more than half. Now that they saw Mei Shuiyan using the same trick again, how would they dare to fight her head-on? All of their swords were focused on the break formula. When they saw that their attacks had failed, they all retreated. Mei Shuiyan's white robes fluttered in the wind. Her sword was like a dragon, pointing south and attacking north. Everyone was intimidated by her unparalleled reputation and the peerless sharpness of her divine sword. They retreated step by step. For a moment, it became Mei Shuiyan who had the advantage of being outnumbered. The reason why Mei Shuiyan was able to achieve such a result was not only because of her own strength and the sharpness of her divine weapon, but also because there were too many of them. There was no need to look for a target. Wherever her divine sword passed, there were enemies. She only needed to fight. Although the Hermitage's side had 29 top experts, there were only 3 or 4 of them who could actually fight with Mei Shuiyan at the same time. There were too many of them. Their hands and feet were tied, and they couldn't fight to their fullest. Ning Wuqing saw that the situation was not favorable for him. His face darkened. He understood the reason behind it and immediately shouted, "Hu Menglong, you will lead your 3 brothers to attack. The rest of you, retreat for now. Split into groups of 4 and take turns to attack. As soon as the situation becomes critical, attack immediately. The moment the second group attacks, the first group must retreat immediately. Those who have not participated in the battle, form a slightly larger encirclement outside the battlefield. Be prepared for her to abandon the battle and escape at any time. If there is an opportunity, call out to Enqing." There was a whistling sound in the battlefield. Most of the people immediately retreated, leaving only 4 people to surround Mei Shuiyan and continue the battle. For snow-white long swords were like snowflakes, stacked layer upon layer. They were like lightning flashing across the sky, shooting out cold streaks of electricity in all directions. Mei Shuiyan's breath was long and steady. Her body was soft and graceful as she floated around. It was obvious that she was at ease and at ease. She did not panic at all because of the opponent's tactic of taking turns to attack. Use your inner strength to fight. Collide. We have the absolute advantage in terms of numbers. It is to our advantage to exhaust her. Ning Wuqing shouted from outside the battlefield, "Hu Menglong. Are you stupid? She must have sustained serious injuries from the battle with the Supreme Golden City. Even if she is not injured, she must have used up a lot of her inner strength. Why are you still using weapons to attack? Use your palm strength. Use your Xian Qi. Force her to fight with brute force. Increase her exhaustion, wear her down, and trap her to death." Hu Menglong was the other superior supreme martial artist of the Hermitage. He was one of the 3 people who were fighting alongside him. After they came to the Hermitage, the 4 of them became brothers because of their mutual affinity. Since then, they often practiced martial arts together. After almost 100 years, their minds were faintly connected and their tacit understanding had reached the point of perfection. At this moment, when the 4 of them attacked together, they unexpectedly felt their hands and feet being tied. They were all greatly shocked. Although everyone knew that Mei Shuiyan was the #1 beast king of Tianfa and her strength was tyrannical, they did not expect her to be at this level. One should know that Hu Menglong's strength was already above the supreme martial artist level. Although his 3 sworn brothers had not reached his level, they were infinitely close to it. Shen Xian was at the 12th level. Every step was like stepping into the heavens. Shen Xian was below the 4th level. Shen Xian was only at the level of an ordinary Shen Xian. Once he reached the 5th level, his strength would take a huge leap and he would be at the supreme martial artist level. As for Shen Xian, when he reached the 9th level, he would be beyond the supreme martial artist level. He would be at the superior supreme martial artist level. But if he could surpass Shen Xian to the 12th level, he would be at a whole new level, the supreme martial artist level. That was Mei Shuiyan's current level. And this level was infinitely close to the true peak of this world's strength. Life has an end, but martial arts has no end. This sentence was applicable to any world. If a martial arts genius could have an unlimited lifespan, then no one could say what kind of height he would reach. In fact, it did not even need to be a genius. As long as one had a long enough life, anyone could have extremely powerful strength. Unfortunately, the limitations of human lifespan had eliminated this possibility. Hu Menglong roared and leaped up. He sheathed his sword in an instant and spread out his hands. An overwhelming force surged out of his palms. His body changed positions in the air repeatedly. In an instant, the entire sky seemed to be filled with pairs of huge handprints, covering the sky and covering the sun. The handprints swept out in all directions and landed with a loud rumble. He had obviously listened to Ning Wuqing's words. Now was not the time to be a hero. Even if they were to exchange injuries for injuries, as long as they could aggravate Mei Shuiyan's internal injuries, even if it was just a little, it would be extremely helpful to the overall situation today. Chapter 573. When Mei Shuiyan heard Ning Wuqing's words, she couldn't help but laugh mockingly and said, "Ning Wuqing, you're really shameless as a world protector. You're really unscrupulous and unscrupulous. Not only are you ganging up on me and taking turns to fight me, you're even prepared to use your hidden weapons at any time. The Hermitage is really worthy of being a big sect, your methods are really open and aboveboard, even your despicable actions are carried out in the open. This venerable is full of admiration for you." As he said this, his body turned nimbly, and he actually dodged the attacks that had no space to dodge. Then, he slashed out 4 times, forcing the 4 powerful enemies back one by one. This sentence caused everyone's faces to turn red with embarrassment. Before these people had entered the Hermitage, any one of them had roamed the pugilistic world unhindered, and had always been solitary experts. Now that they had entered the Hermitage, their strength was even greater than before, and their statuses were even more prestigious. But now that they were dealing with their enemies, they actually had to gang up on them and take turns to fight them, and even had to use hidden weapons to greet them. They all felt that they had lost all face. Ning Wuqing snorted coldly and said, "Venerable Mei, you can't hide the truth from me. There's no need to use your shoddy goading methods. We're here for the sake of the people of the world, so we naturally need to preserve our bodies for the war for seizing the heavens in the future. If we suddenly lose our lives in your hands while trying to be a hero, that would be a real waste. For the future of the continent, I, Ning Wuqing, have a clear conscience." What a good, clear conscience. Mei Shuiyan let out a long roar, and suddenly laughed loudly. Not bad, not bad. This is indeed the style of the Hermitage. This kind of clear conscience can make people kill people after hearing it. Only then will they have a clear conscience. Before Mei Shuiyan finished her sentence, she swung her long sword in a circle, and a brilliant sword flower shot out in all directions like a blooming peony. Then, she swung her sword in a circle again, and another sword flower flew out. Although she was holding a long sword in her hand, in the eyes of the crowd, it was like fireworks. Countless bright and dazzling sword flowers shot out continuously. Hu Menglong and his brothers, who were fighting barehanded, suddenly fell into a difficult situation. They were in a sorry state. Ning Wuqing's shameless words had undoubtedly infuriated Mei Shuyan, and there was no room for mercy. At this moment, Hu Menglong and his brothers could be said to be suffering in silence. They could only dodge with all their might. In their calculations, since they had already abandoned their swords and used their palms, then how high would the status of Venerable Mei be? Why would he lower himself and use a sword to deal with an empty-handed opponent? This was a matter of a top-notch powerhouse's dignity and demeanor. If the Venerable Mei had kept his long sword, then the four of them would have found a chance to fight her head-on. As long as they could fight her head-on, they would win. When one's internal organs were injured, the most important thing was to avoid being shaken. Even if the Venerable Mei was really uninjured, it would consume a lot of Xian Qi and energy to fight with her palms. The more energy consumed, the more advantageous it would be. But they had miscalculated. They never expected that the four of them would have kept their swords and attacked with their palms. However, Mei Shuyan did not care about the demeanor of a powerhouse. She still relied on the sharpness of her sword to attack fiercely. Not only did she break their palms, but the four of them were also in a dangerous situation. Ning Wuqing was right. If they used weapons, they would not be able to fight her head-on. Mei Shuyan's sword was too sharp and powerful. They were afraid that before they could fight her head-on, their weapons would be broken. How could they fight her head-on? However, although they could fight her head-on with their palms, the opponent was still using a sword. The sword's aura was everywhere. No matter how dense the palms were, they could not withstand the sword's aura. They were in an even more awkward situation. Could he really use his palms of flesh and blood to fight head-on against the divine sword that could cut through iron like mud? Wouldn't that be even more suicidal? They did not know that when Mei Shuyan saw that they had abandoned their swords and used their palms, she had planned to keep her sword as well. However, at this moment, Jun Moxie's voice came into Mei Shuyan's ears, "Don't let go of your sword. They know that you are injured. That is a mistake. If you let go of your sword, they will see through you. Why are you still so stupid? They are attacking you without regard for their status, and you are still talking about morality with them." Jun Moxie's voice was really domineering. Mei Shuyan's heart softened. She listened to him obediently and continued to attack with her sword. It was indeed a great advantage. Although it was somewhat out of line with her identity, a sweet smile appeared at the corner of her mouth because of this sentence. Jun Moxie, who was invisible, was even more disdainful. He knew that his opponent had a sword that could cut through gold and jade, but he still chose to use his palms instead. How stupid! What status? What demeanor? Could it be more important than his life? Besides, since Hermitage was so shameless, why should he care about the rules of the pugilistic world? I am the rules. Venerable Mei, you are the Lord of Tian Fa. How dare you use a sword to bully an empty-handed person? This is so unfair. I feel ashamed for you. Ning Wuqing was anxious when he saw the situation. He did not expect that Mei Shuyan would be so thick-skinned and continue to use her sword. In his memory, this was not the style of the Venerable Mei. Ning Wuqing, if you want to be fair, how about a one-on-one duel? Even if you come with 100 people to take turns to fight me, this Venerable will still fight you to the end. Mei Shuyan sneered and said, "You still have the face to say the word fair? You only saw that I was using my sword. Why didn't you say that there were 4 of you?" Ning Wuqing was speechless. After a while, he said angrily, "Venerable Mei, it seems that you have learned a lot from your little lover. However, young people will regret it one day. If you, the number 1 of Tian Fa, get kicked out of the Jun family and become an abandoned wife, don't blame me for not warning you." He was at his wit's end, but he suddenly used this method in an attempt to infuriate Mei Shuyan and create an opportunity. But he did not know that it was this unforgiving sentence that had truly aroused Mei Shuyan's murderous intent. Despicable! Mei Shuyan's eyebrows were raised and she shouted. Her sword was like a raging river, and her attacks became even more fierce. Hu Menglong and his brothers could not help but complain, secretly cursing Ning Wuqing's rotten idea. They wanted to take out their swords again, but they did not have the chance. Why did this guy have to provoke her for no reason? He put us in danger for no reason. Ning Wuqing was a little surprised. He watched the fight in the field while paying attention to Jun Moxie's movements. For someone as experienced and astute as him, how could he ignore any factors that could affect the future? But he still could not figure out why Jun Moxie had suddenly disappeared. And why did he disappear so abruptly and so mysteriously? In his heart, he could still clearly remember that Jun Moxie seemed to have become one with his sword and unleashed thousands of sword rays in the air. But it did not hit anyone present. And after that dazzling sword ray disappeared, Jun Moxie's figure also disappeared. This turn of events was truly strange. And this Jun Moxie's movement technique seemed to have been taught by his master. He had to reevaluate his evaluation of this kid. And he also had to be careful of sneak attacks from behind. At this time, Hu Menglong howled in grief and indignation. One of his brothers had been ambushed by Mei Shuiyan's marvelous sword aura. A long and deep wound was cut from his shoulder to below his ribs. It was so deep that the bone could be seen. And this was because Mei Shuiyan was worried that she could not expose too much of her strength, so she did not use her full strength. Otherwise, with her real strength, how could a Xuanwu who was not even a supreme martial artist be spared? Ning Wuqing's expression did not change. Lengling ordered, Hu Menglong and the other three, retreat. The other group, attack. Hu Menglong shouted, I will not retreat. I want to avenge my third brother. Chief Ning, my brother's blood is still here, and it is still steaming. How can I retreat? I will not rest until this hatred is avenged. He could clearly see that his brother's ribs were still gushing with fresh blood. The wound had been completely burst open by the abdominal pressure, and his internal organs had subsequently rushed out. At the edge, the white ribs were broken. It was a ghastly sight to behold. Mei Shuiyan's seemingly gentle slash didn't seem to be fatal at first glance. However, everyone present could see that the seemingly gentle slash contained an immense amount of sword qi. It didn't reveal its sharpness and only erupted after a while. It even directly cut open that person's abdomen, leaving him with no way to save him. Although he wouldn't die immediately, with such severe injuries, there was no hope for him to survive. Ning Wuqing scolded coldly, Hu Menglong. I told you to retreat. Hu Menglong roared at the sky. His eyes were bloodshot. He ignored Ning Wuqing's order and rushed forward with a roar. His brother's tragic death had made him lose his mind. He was like a crazy demon. Suddenly, the expert who had his abdomen cut let out a shrill cry. He shouted miserably, Big brother, I will go first. The injured expert knew that he was not far from death and was shocked to see his elder brother taking revenge for him. Disregarding his own life, he attacked the enemy without a care for his own life. His death was imminent and he could not help but make up his mind. He did not bother to tend to his own injuries and forcefully gathered the remaining Xian qi in his body. Suddenly, a thick black aura appeared on his body. He howled like a wolf and without dodging, he pounced towards Mei Shuiyan. He let his intestines hang outside his body and rushed forward. Although his injury was fatal, his strength was close to the level of a supreme martial artist. Now that he was fighting with all his strength, without any regard for his own safety, his power was surprisingly great. Mei Shuiyan's eyes turned cold. With a pu sound, her sword had accurately pierced through that person's heart. But that person did not retreat. He gathered his last breath, widened his eyes, and spread his arms. He rushed forward quickly, as if he wanted to hug Mei Shuiyan. Mei Shuiyan did not dare to be careless. She flew backward, turned around, and gave an invisible kick to his chest. Only then did that person's corpse fly away. The strong Xian energy spread everywhere, and that person's body exploded into a bloody pulp in midair. Chapter 574. Frogs at the bottom of a well, how would you know how vast the heavenly river is? If I don't give you guys a taste of my might, you guys will become more and more daring. Mei Xuan laughed coldly, and her eyes flashed. Her body, which was originally in the air, floated up again. She turned around gracefully in mid-air, and with her head down and legs up, she held her sword with both hands instead of one hand. Then, she slashed down with all her might. This strike was truly earth-shattering. Woo! A sharp howl suddenly rang out. In front of the 7 experts, a silver light wall suddenly appeared. It flickered with cold light and completely condensed into a solid form. Although it was just a simple slash from top to bottom, the range of this slash covered the entire battlefield. At the same time, the 7 experts felt that this sword had a terrifying feeling that there was no way to avoid it. Many of their vital points were covered by this sword. Before the sword light arrived, the sword chi had already hit their faces, making them feel cold. There was no room to retreat. The only way to deal with it was to fight head-on. Only by trading one's life for another's would there be a chance of survival. Such a terrifying ultimate killing move, it was believed that anyone who used it would need to go through the process of accumulating power before they could release it. But in the hands of Mei Xuan, this logic was overturned. Just like that, he leaped up and pressed down. This sword had already been casually swung out. How could this not be unexpected? The 7 experts roared at the same time. They gathered all the energy they could muster at this moment and launched a desperate counterattack. Hu Menglong took the lead with his sword and instantly burst forth with all of his strength. Without holding anything back, he rushed towards the silver wall of light. He didn't want to win, he just wanted to perish together with his opponent. He roared crazily and rushed forward with his body and sword. He had left everything in the world behind him. At this moment, there was only revenge in his heart. The sword was like a meteor, arriving in a flash. Everyone stared wide-eyed at this earth-shattering strike. They felt as if their souls had been stolen away. This time, it was a real head-on collision. If Venerable Mei really had internal injuries, or even if he wasn't injured, as long as his yuan power had been greatly depleted, then the outcome of the battle must be determined after this strike. Or they could escape, but they had to be prepared for it. They could not afford to fail at the last step. Everyone held their breaths and focused all their attention on the scene. Every possible route that could lead to Mei Xuan's escape route was carefully monitored. Bang! Hu Menglong let out a shrill cry. Together with his sword, he was the first to crash into the wall of light formed by the silver sword aura. Paw! 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 With 3 crisp sounds, the sword in Hu Menglong's hand broke into 3 pieces. Then, it turned into iron dust that filled the sky and dissipated. Hu Menglong's body seemed to have been swallowed by a monster. First, his right hand that was holding the sword disappeared. Then, his body that was flying in the air started to disappear from his head, shoulders, upper body, waist, legs, and soles of his feet. Bit by bit, it quickly disappeared into nothingness. It was as if there was an incomparably ferocious wild beast in front of him that was slowly swallowing Hu Menglong into its stomach. It was neither fast nor slow, and it was calm and unhurried. Boom! The remaining 6 experts' attacks finally came into contact with Mei Xuan's sword aura. Like a sudden clap of thunder, millions of rays of cold light shot out in all directions. At the same time, the 6 experts' bodies were sent flying. Their flesh was torn and their bodies were bleeding profusely. Their hands were empty. The swords and knives that were in their hands had been turned into nothingness. Blood flowed from their mouths and they screamed in agony as they fell from the sky. At this moment, they no longer had the demeanor of a powerful expert. They were waving their arms and legs as they fell from the sky. They couldn't even change their positions in the air. This was because all of their energy had been released in that one strike and they had suffered the strongest rebound. At this moment, it would be difficult for them to even move their little fingers, let alone change their positions in the air to control their fall. As the sword aura faded away, Mei Xuan, who had won the battle, staggered backwards. Her snow-white robe was bleeding from 7 to 8 places, like a red plum blossom in the snow. It was eye-catching and shocking. Her complexion turned green and white, then instantly turned pink, and after changing 3 times, she finally spat out a small mouthful of blood with a "what" sound. The 7 experts' attacks had been destroyed by Mei Shuyan's sword. Puff! 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 The 6 figures fell to the ground one after another. The crowd hadn't recovered from the huge shock. They turned their heads around like wooden puppets and saw that the 6 experts had fallen to the ground and were rolling on the ground. They seemed to have lost control of their bodies. Every roll left a large pool of blood on the snow. Screams and groans could be heard, but 3 of them only rolled a few times after falling to the ground, and then there was no more sound. He didn't even let out a slight groan. It was obvious that he had died instantly. Some had lost their arms, some had lost their legs. However, those who lost their arms and legs were still alive. Some of them had suffered 7 to 8 sword strikes and had no chance of survival. Tian Fa Heaven Punishing Sword. Everyone couldn't help but think of this name that was filled with awe and respect. That was the ultimate killing move that the previous lords of Tian Fa used to deal with the strange races in the war for seizing the heavens. For 10,000 years, there had been no exceptions. But today, it was finally used on a human. The tyrannical power of this sword caused everyone's hearts to beat wildly. 1 sword to defeat 7 supreme martial artists. What a terrifying sword. What a peerless sword that could shock the heavens and make the gods weep. This was simply a miracle. And right now, this unbelievable miracle had appeared in front of their eyes. Just as everyone was in shock, suddenly, another silver ray of light, bringing with it the color of blood, shot up into the sky. If Mei Shuyan's sword was like thunder from the 9 heavens, then this sword was like the summoning of hell. One shook the heavens and the earth, the other was silent. One was like the thunder of spring, the other was like a drizzle. The silver light came from behind them, silently and at a high speed. It was an extremely powerful and shocking sword. Just when everyone's hearts were trembling, filled with fear, and completely defenseless, this sword came out of nowhere. Assassination, it was another assassination. This kind of perfect timing was impossible for anyone who wasn't a top-notch assassin to achieve. One had to know that this sword was aimed at a supreme martial artist expert. But even so, this sword was still able to destroy everything in its path. It was indestructible. Godly sword, blood of yellow flame. The evil monarch of this generation had finally unleashed this mysterious and marvelous sword at this moment. The sword light silently flashed past the waist of an expert, and then came out from the same position of the second expert, bringing along a trail of blood. Then, it ruthlessly slashed into the waist of the third expert. The third person finally let out a shrill scream, but the scream was cut off abruptly. He wanted to pull out his sword, and his hand was already on the hilt of his sword. However, when he pulled out his sword and was about to counterattack, he realized that his legs were firmly planted on the ground from his waist down. Only his upper body was flying in the air. He was shocked and panicked. He circulated his Xian Qi with all his might. But when he activated his Xian Qi, he realized that all his internal organs were gushing out from the hole in his lower body. He fell heavily to the ground, but he immediately used his sword to support half of his body and stood up. He was like a wooden stake that was planted flat on the ground. His eyes looked around in panic and hatred, but he didn't see anything. That sword ray had already disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. He wanted to say something, but when he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood, the only mouthful of blood, because his blood had already flowed out from the hole in his lower body. The pure Xian Qi of the supreme martial artist level temporarily preserved his last bit of Xian Qi. Unfortunately, the rapid loss of his life essence had already caused him to step on the road to the Yellow Springs. He let out a moan that sounded like a sigh, and finally fell to the ground powerlessly. His eyes were wide open like a dead fish, looking at the empty space in front of him, as if he was still puzzled about something. The 2 supreme martial artists who were standing beside him had a strange expression of extreme fear on their faces. They subconsciously touched their waists with their hands, and their faces immediately changed. Because they suddenly felt that their stomachs were very comfortable and warm, so warm that they wanted to just fall asleep, sleep until the end of time, and never wake up again. That was a kind of warmth that went deep into their souls. This kind of comfortable feeling would only appear when there was a lot of internal bleeding, when the boiling blood left the blood vessels and flowed into the abdomen, using its own boiling temperature to warm the internal organs of the human body. This kind of extreme comfort was the omen of death. The two of them widened their eyes in fear and lowered their heads in disbelief, looking at their waists. The next moment, the accumulated blood in their abdomen finally broke through the obstruction and suddenly spurted out with a chi-chi sound. The three of them just stood there strangely, but from each of their waists, thin lines of blood continuously spurted out, as if the area around their waists was a fine fountain. Although it was fine, it was strong and powerful, and actually spurted out several feet away. On the snowy ground around each of them, there was a neat and round red circle, and in the air, there was a hazy mist of blood that constantly replenished this circle. The source was their bodies. It was a beautiful and strange red circle. It also carried the shadow of death, and a terrifying murderous intent, as if the gates of hell could open at any time. Only then did the two of them scream, and only then did they understand what had happened. They screamed in fear, but did not dare to move. Because, if they moved, their upper and lower bodies would be separated. But if they did not move, would their upper and lower bodies not be separated? After all, cutting them in half was already an irreversible fact. Brother. Chapter 575. Today's fourth chapter. Still working hard, fifth chapter. Calling for everyone's support. Thank you. Even the people of Hermitage did not know that one of the three supreme martial artists who had just been split into two was Ning Wuqing's younger brother, Cheng Fengyi. Although they did not share the same surname, they were of the same blood. Ning Wuqing had put in a lot of effort for this brother of his to become a supreme martial artist and then enter Hermitage. The two of them had spent their entire lives together, but they had never imagined that they would be split into two here, forever separated. Close to 200 years of kinship had turned into nothingness after this blade of blood. Ning Wuqing had gone mad. He roared, "Jun Moxie! I know you did it. Come out if you have the guts." He immediately realized that Jun Moxie's mysterious disappearance must have been in preparation for this attack. But he had already realized this, and yet the other party had still succeeded. At this moment, Ning Wuqing was filled with remorse, grief and indignation. He only felt that his heart was suffocating and filled with anger. It was as if he wanted to tear open his stomach and dig out all his internal organs to vent his anger. Suffocating anger. "Jun Moxie, you despicable little bastard. Come out here. Come out. You bastard, you bastard. You only know how to sneak attack from behind, a butcher and executioner. You immoral bastard, you should be struck by lightning and die a horrible death." Ning Wuqing roared crazily. There was no trace of his usual calmness. Under his roar, the two experts who were still standing, but had already been cut into two, finally swayed a little. Their eyes were filled with sorrow, and then their faces flushed red. One of them had a square face, big ears, and a tall figure. It was obvious that if he had been young, he would have been a handsome man. This person was Cheng Fengyi, Ning Wuqing's half-brother. Cheng Fengyi sighed softly and slowly turned to look at his former colleagues. He said indifferently, "I'm going." Everyone's faces were filled with grief and anger. He calmly looked at his abdomen. Blood had already stopped spurting out, but it was still gushing out, gurgling and flowing down his robe. There was already a large pool of sticky blood under his feet. He raised his head, and with a low but heavy voice, he slowly said, "Everyone, take care." Only then did he turn around to look at Ning Wuqing. Ning Wuqing's entire body was trembling. He stretched out his trembling hands, wanting to hug his brother, but he was afraid that if he moved, he would end the last bit of his brother's life, so he did not dare to move. He reached out his hands to his brother, not daring to touch him. Cheng Fengyi looked at Ning Wuqing and suddenly revealed a miserable smile. He forcefully held his last breath and said slowly, "Big brother. I have been raised by you all my life, and I have learned all my skills. My only wish is to be able to call you big brother in public. Although I can't, but I really want to, big brother. I have been working hard." Ning Wuqing's hair and beard were standing on end. His tears gushed out like a river that had opened its floodgates. His whole body was trembling, and tears had already blurred his eyes. He said in a trembling voice, "Brother. My blood brother. I will now announce to the whole world that you are my blood brother. Good brother. You are also a Ning. A member of the Ning family." Cheng Fengyi smiled, and his face was filled with satisfaction. His eyes slowly became lifeless, and he said in a low voice, "I am going to be filial to my parents in the netherworld. Big brother, you live well, don't let us worry for you." Suddenly, his body bent, and his upper body slowly fell forward. Ning Wuqing rushed forward and hugged the lower half of his body. But Cheng Fengyi's breath had already stopped, and there was no more sound. Only his face was filled with sincere satisfaction. Ning Wuqing suddenly burst into tears. Although he called himself heartless, cut off all his emotions, and lived alone for the rest of his life, he valued the only blood relation he had in this world. His brother's death was like tearing Ning Wuqing's heart into two. "Brother. Your surname should be Ning, your surname has always been Ning." Ning Wuqing roared at the sky. He was so regretful that he wanted to cut his own throat with his sword. All these years, when the tragedy happened to his family, his second mother and his younger brother fled for their lives, his entire family was massacred, his fiancée was brutally raped to death, Ning Wuqing hated everyone from then on, including his second mother and brother. He stubbornly believed that under the circumstances, his second mother could have escaped with his fiancée, but she only brought his son. So Ning Wuqing could not forgive her. So although he cared for his brother, he never acknowledged his identity as a member of the Ning family. Cheng Fengyi knew that his brother could not let go of the knot in his heart, and had no choice but to follow his mother's surname. Until today, Ning Wuqing finally realized that he had made a grave mistake. He always knew what his brother had been yearning for, and he knew it very well. But it was only until his brother died in front of him that his last hope was fulfilled. His biggest hope. But even if it was fulfilled now, what was the use? Looking at the satisfied expression on Cheng Fengyi's face, Ning Wuqing suddenly felt a tearing pain in his heart. It was as if those salty tears had flowed into his heart. His brother's entire life was only for this one sentence from him. But he had always been stingy and did not give it. Ning Wuqing suddenly felt the world turn dark. He slowly raised his head. Everyone suddenly realized that his eyes were red with tears. Tears of blood. Mei Xuan stood far away. This was the best moment to strike, the best chance to destroy the enemy. But Mei Xuan did not strike, only looking at the enemy with pity. Jun Mo Xia also did not make his move at this moment. Although he knew that this timing was even better than the previous timing, but in the face of this world's true feelings and deep remorse, even if he was an enemy, Jun Mo Xia would still give him a chance to bid farewell. This was not being stubborn. It was human nature. Jun Moxie was a man of true feelings. He would rather give his enemy some time to feel warm. Jun Mo Xia didn't regret killing them and causing them to be separated by life and death. They were enemies. Either you kill me, or I kill you. There was no such thing as regret or sympathy. If there was sympathy or even regret, it would be a woman's benevolence. It would be digging one's own grave. But facing the true feelings of the world, even the evil monarch's killer heart would not disturb them at this moment. He only appeared silently beside Mei Xuan. His eyes were cold as he looked at Ning Wuqing and the rest who were immersed in grief. You are in grief now, but I can give you a chance. You can regret and vent your sorrow. I understand your feelings, so I will wait for you. But when you recover, we will fight again. He wouldn't show any mercy. The evil monarch had his own principles. Ning Wuqing placed his head on his brother's chest and gently rubbed it. He knelt on the ground and trembled. He murmured, "Second brother, my good second brother. Ningfengyi, you are Ningfengyi, you will always be Ningfengyi. Big brother is wrong, it is big brother's fault, big brother deserves to die, big brother has made you suffer for a lifetime, big brother has let you down, big brother has let you down." Ning Wuqing's voice was extremely low as he slowly spoke. His originally gray hair, in this short period of time, suddenly turned completely silver white, without any impurities. White hair in an instant, silver hair in an instant. In his arms, Cheng Fengyi lay quietly. There was some mockery and regret on his face, but more than that, there was peace and satisfaction. Mei Shuyan sighed softly and said, "I did not expect Ning Wuqing to be such a stubborn person." Jun Moxie said lightly, "You are wrong." Mei Shuyan turned to look at him and asked curiously, "Isn't that so?" Jun Moxie said heavily, "I believe that most people in this world are stubborn people. They all have the most beautiful side of their hearts. Even if one was a heinous criminal, or an evil person, whether it was a pervert or a prostitute, they all had their own sacred place in their hearts. This part of divinity is true love." Jun Mo Xia sighed lightly and said, "A person's true love is something that everyone only experiences once in their lifetime. But once they fall in love, it will never change. Therefore, even a playboy has someone he loves the most. Even a prostitute who has a pair of jade-like arms and a bit of rosy lips has someone she loves the most. That's why there are so many people sighing in their dreams at night. That's why there are so many regrets in the world." Mei Shuyan frowned slightly, "This is different. How can a playboy and a prostitute have true love?" Jun Moxie laughed and said, "But how do you know there is no true love? A playboy is influenced by his environment and gradually becomes a playboy. Isn't it the same for a prostitute? If there was someone who grew up in luxury, would such a woman become a prostitute unless there was a major change? If a person grows up in poverty and never has a full meal until adulthood, will such a person become a playboy? So, it is all because of the environment." He sighed and said, "So, in order to get his love, Murong Xiu, the emperor of Tianxiang did not hesitate to slaughter Yi Gehan's entire family. And Yi Gehan, for his true love, has never changed. He would rather betray the heavens than betray you. Also, my third uncle waited in a daze for my third aunt. My third aunt stayed alone at the top of a snowy mountain for 10 years for her true love. My mother was willing to go into a deep sleep for my father. This is all caused by true love. True love can accomplish anything, but it can also lead to evil." Chapter 576. This kind of love, which is beyond reason, caused his brother's whole life of sorrow. It also caused his own life of sorrow. Today, it added a tinge of tragedy. The saddest person is not his brother. Ning Wuqing fulfilled his biggest wish at the last moment of his life. The saddest person is Ning Wuqing. Jun Moxie said solemnly. Because of the tragedy of love, he personally caused the tragedy of kinship. And at the last moment of his brother's life, he left Ning Wuqing with the biggest regret. So, Ning Wuqing's true love caused him to be heartless, and it also caused a tragedy that he could never make up for in his life. But, Ning Wuqing's sorrow today, wasn't it us who caused it? Mei Shuyan sighed, unable to bear it. "You're wrong again. This sorrow is only a matter of time, or a matter of who triggered it. Moreover, if we didn't cause his tragedy, the one crying over his corpse right now, with his hair white in an instant, is not you, but me." Jun Moxie's eyes were bright as he looked at Mei Shuyan. "This kind of sorrow, we only need to understand, and we can sympathize, but we cannot be merciful because of it. It is because we saw this kind of true love, that we must cherish each other even more. Do you understand? Shui Yan, if I was the one being chopped into two, what would you do?" Even with Mei Shuyan's calm temperament, she couldn't help but shiver. It was as if she could see Jun Moxie's miserable corpse on the ground. Her heart ached, and she couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Then, there is no meaning in me living anymore," Jun Moxie sighed and said, "This is the truth. In this world, there are countless tragedies. If we don't want to have a tragedy, we must think of all ways to make our enemies suffer. This is the martial world. June Moxie turned around, looked at Ning Wuching, and said indifferently, or should I say, this is life. Ning Wuching has always been heartless, but we are heartless because we have feelings. This is the difference between us and Ning Wuching. This is life. The word life always contains a lot of sorrow, blood, and tears. How much hard work, tenderness, and true love. Mei Shuiyan digested June Moxie's words, and suddenly felt a little stunned. Looking at Ning Wuqing's tearful and sorrowful look, Mei Shuiyan turned her face and looked at June Mo Xie's handsome side profile. Her heart suddenly felt strangely satisfied. As long as the one lying on the ground is not him, I have nothing to fear. At this moment, June Mo Xie's expression was unprecedentedly serious, even a little lonely, a little elegant, like an elegant young master with a frown on his face, looking at her with an indifferent and somewhat pitiful expression. Looking at all the living beings in the world, looking at the mortal world, his demeanor was so transcendent, so towering, so ancient and everlasting. He was like a king who ruled over everything, standing calmly above the clouds, looking down at all the living beings in the world. Mei Shuiyan was actually in a daze. At this moment, she suddenly realized that this unique aura that June Moxie had unintentionally displayed was not inferior to her own Tian Fa King's aura. In fact, it was even more transcendent. It was as if he was born with it, majestic and imposing. June Moxie tilted his head, and looked at her strangely, and said, "What are you looking at? Why are you so entranced by it?" Mei Shuiyan did not notice, and said in a daze, "I'm looking at you, you're so beautiful." June Moxie was stunned. He did not expect that with Mei Shuiyan's arrogance and coldness, she could actually say such words of love. Caught off guard, even with June Moxie's 2 lifetimes of thick skin, he could not help but blush a little. For a man to be praised, "You're so beautiful," was indeed a little embarrassing. Mei Shuiyan finally came back to her senses after saying that. Her face instantly turned red, and she could not help but lower her head. Although June Moxie's face was a little red from this sudden attack, when he saw how shy Mei Shuiyan was, he immediately recovered and said with a cheeky smile, "Then, since you're so beautiful, are you willing to suffer some injuries tonight?" Mei Shuiyan's face instantly turned red, and she pinched him with all her might. Suddenly, she asked fiercely, "Oh right, I forgot to ask you. Earlier, you were talking about true love, and you said that a person only has one true love in their life. Then let me ask you, you have so many female friends, where is your true love?" June Mo Xie was instantly flabbergasted. In fact, he didn't know how to reply for a moment. He had just said it out of the blue, and did not know that he had unknowingly dragged himself into this. How was he going to explain this? His mouth was open for a while, and he finally recovered. However, he still could not answer Mei Shuiyan's question, because he really did not have an answer. But at the same time, Mei Shuiyan's words finally made June Moxie start to consider this matter in his heart. "Yes, I have quite a few beautiful women by my side. So far, I have confirmed my relationship with Guan Qinghan, De Xiaoyi, and Mei Shuiyan. Even if there are only these 3 women, then who is my true love? Out of these 3 women, any one of them is an unparalleled beauty. Who do I love the most?" June Moxie was a little stunned. Was he too much of a playboy? If he had to choose one of these 3 women, how should he choose? Should he choose Mei Shuiyan? She really seemed to be the one he loved the most. But what about Guan Qinghan? She was cold and beautiful, and she gave up everything for the June family. She did not hesitate to use her chastity to save his life. All these years, she had given up so much for the June family without complaint or regret. June Moxie felt that he owed her a lot, and he also had a deep-rooted affection for Guan Qinghan. How could he give her up? If he really gave up, Guan Qinghan would no longer have the courage to continue living, and she could die at any time. This guilt would accompany him for the rest of his life. Could he give up on De Xiaoyi? De Xiaoyi was innocent and cute, and she was infatuated with him. She had already fallen in love with him when he was at his most debauchee. For him, she did not hesitate to travel to Tiannan. She was even more afraid that he would not want her. She would rather get an aphrodisiac to make it a fait accompli. Although this matter did not succeed because of the little girl's immaturity, it was an indisputable fact that Dugu Xiaoyi did not care about anything for him. Moreover, she had shocked the entire Tianxiang city by entering the city with her pregnant belly. She hadn't even given herself the slightest chance to retreat. Who would be willing to give up such a true love? How could he give it up? Even if he had a heart of stone, could he be so heartless? And there was also Mei Xuan. This was even more impossible to give up. Mei Xuan was the king of Tianfa. She had met him by chance and followed him all the way. The two of them had worked together, and their hearts had already become one. And he had finally changed from teasing her at the beginning to never leave her side. Mei Xuan had been pure and clean all her life. This was the first time she had fallen in love, and she was always thinking about him. How could he give her up? If he really did that, even Jun Moxie would look down on himself. Not to mention the fact that Mei Xuan had single-handedly stopped the illusory Blood Ocean's two great masters, defeated Huang Taiyang, and even swore to live and die with the Jun family under the siege of the Three Holy Lands. Which one of these things was not good for him? If he really gave them up, Mei Xuan might not collapse or commit suicide. But she would definitely be disheartened and go to the Tianfa forest, never to return again. This was something that was certain. No matter how Jun Moxie thought about it, he couldn't give up a single one of them. He couldn't even bear to give up a single one of them. Towards Guan Qinghan, he respected and adored her. In front of Guan Qinghan, he often had a warm and comfortable feeling. He had a feeling that he needed someone to take care of him, and he longed for someone to protect him. This feeling was even stronger and more obvious after their relationship in Tiannan. Although Jun Moxie didn't want to admit it, he clearly knew in his heart that he really had this kind of desire. Towards Dugu Xiaoyi, he was affectionate and doting, as if she was his soulmate. After all, she hated him so much in the past. Only Dugu Xiaoyi had given him that comfort. Although he was completely able to get through it, that extra thought was like a sweet spring appearing in a desert. Apart from his own family, the only support he had was from the outside world. Towards Mei Xuan, Jun Moxie had a strange feeling. It was a feeling of his heart throbbing. It was a feeling of mutual understanding. It was a feeling of supporting each other in times of need. It was a feeling of living side by side. This feeling was meaningful and warm. It was a feeling of satisfaction and happiness. If he really wanted to find a feeling of love among these three women, it would undoubtedly be Mei Xuan. But how could he give up the other two? Towards Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiaoyi, was there really no love? Yes. It was just that it wasn't as obvious as it was for Mei Xuan. Could it be that I am such a fickle person? Jun Moxie asked himself in his heart. He actually forgot to answer Mei Xuan's question. For the first time, he was really distressed. Who was my true love? Just as he was thinking about this awkward question that was hard to answer, Ning Wuqing, who was still grieving over the death of his brother, had already stood up. He carried his brother's half-body and stood up. His white hair fluttered messily in the air. His body was still as straight as a sword, but he no longer had the elegance and bearing he had before. He turned around slowly and raised his head. The remaining masters of Hermitage suddenly exclaimed. Jun Moxie and Mei Xuan looked at him, and they couldn't help but be surprised. Ning Wuqing's originally rosy face had now turned gray, and wrinkles were piled up. Ning Wuqing's Xian Qi was profound, coupled with the fact that he had always taken good care of himself, even though he was close to 200 years old, but from his face, he looked like a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s. But at this moment, he looked old, like an old farmer who had never cultivated Xian Qi, and had toiled his whole life. His face was full of wrinkles, as if he was going to fall with the wind. He was emaciated. Chapter 577. The moment Ning Wuqing opened his mouth, everyone realized that Ning Wuqing's voice had become unusually hoarse and unpleasant to the ears. Although his tone was calm, everyone could tell that Ning Wuqing's heart was dead. There was no greater sorrow than a dead heart. His brother, whom he had depended on for survival, had suddenly passed away after nearly 200 years of reunion. Ning Wuqing no longer had any desire to live. He only had the thought of revenge. Regardless of whether he could take revenge or not, it was believed that Ning Wuqing would not be able to live on this world anymore. Because Ning Wuqing's withered face had already told everyone one thing, Ning Wuqing had already transferred all his Xian energy to his Dantian. Even the potential of his bones, the protection of his organs. Xian energy. And the potential of his life. He no longer maintained his youthful appearance, no longer maintained his elegant demeanor. His temperament, his appearance, everything else was not important. What he wanted was revenge. This kind of accumulation of power could at least double his power, but once it was unleashed, he would be like a lamp that had run out of oil. Even if a deity came, he would not be able to bring the dead back to life. All in one throw. Regardless of whether Jun Moxie died or not, Ning Wuqing was dead for sure. Ning Wuqing had placed himself in a dead end first. It was clear that his desire for revenge was very urgent. Ning Wuqing carefully placed his brother's body on the ground and slowly stood up. His face was full of remorse and hatred. Jun Moxie sighed and looked at him with pity. Life and death, it's just a reincarnation cycle. Everyone will experience this. Ning Wuqing, you have to restrain your grief and accept the vicissitudes of life. After all, the dead cannot come back to life. I feel very sorry for what happened. When he said this, even Mei Xuan wanted to slap his mouth. You killed my brother, and now you want me to restrain my grief and accept the vicissitudes of life. Ning Wuqing laughed bitterly. He pointed at Jun Moxie and said, Jun Moxie, you killed my brother, and you want me to restrain my grief? Don't you think your words are a little funny? Jun Moxie snorted and said, Ning Wuqing, with your intelligence, it's hard for me to talk to you. Because you actually don't understand what I mean. Ning Wuqing roared at the sky, but do you think I can still calm down now? Jun Moxie, I don't need your crocodile tears. Ning Wuqing naturally understood what Jun Moxie meant. He wanted him to calm down and have a fair fight. However, although Ning Wuqing understood it, he did not appreciate it at all. Because what Jun Moxie said, it was fine to say that he had good intentions, but it was even more hateful to say that he had bad intentions. Rather than saying it was a reminder, it was more like adding fuel to the fire. After all, the person who said those words was the murderer. Therefore, when Jun Moxie earned a good reputation, it made Ning Wuqing lose his composure, and he could not calm down. When dealing with an enemy, he would do anything. Even if the other party was a lover, as long as they drew their swords, they were enemies. Jun Moxie never showed mercy to his enemies. Jun Moxie sighed. He had achieved his goal, so he was not in the mood to ridicule him anymore. He said, Ning Wuqing, I know you want to take revenge on me, right? Then come, I'll be waiting for you here. He paused and said sharply, Ning Wuqing, you only know that your brother is dead, and you want revenge. But have you thought about it? How many people have you killed in your life? How many people are waiting to take revenge on you? Your childish behavior amuses me. Those who died in your hands, their families, which one of them did not grieve as much as you do? Wronged? You have the nerve to say that? What about you? Jun Moxie. Do you think you are very noble? Have your hands not been stained with blood? Where's your conscience? Aren't you the same as me? Ning Wuqing roared madly, what right do you have to say that about me? You butcher. Me? I never said I was a good person. I'm certainly the same as you. In fact, I'm even more cruel and bloodthirsty than you. But I won't put on a face of being wronged like you. If I kill someone, others can naturally kill me. This is the law of the world. Just like how I killed your brother, and you want to take revenge on me. Jun Moxie Lengleng looked at him, Ning Wuqing, since you've decided to die, then I won't give you any more time to recover. It's just that you're crying because of someone's death. There's no meaning in living. Come on. Today will be the anniversary of your death next year. Jun Moxie's tongue was like a knife. His words made Ning Wuching even more confused. Even his eyes became a little confused. Chief Ning. You're not in a stable state of mind now. Don't fall for Jun Moxie's provocation. It's more than enough to surround and kill this adulterous couple if we work together, someone shouted from behind. Ning Wuching laughed bitterly. He didn't reply. He turned his wrist and unsheathed his long sword. A cold light fell on his palm like the ripples of autumn water. Now, action was the best answer. Ning Wuching straightened his back, and his entire person seemed to have regained his original tall and straight arrogance in an instant. He was still like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed, radiating brilliance in all directions. However, this godly sword brought with it a madness of destruction. At this moment, Ning Wuching's originally rapid breathing suddenly became calm again. It wasn't that Ning Wuching could really calm his anger. He was just forcefully suppressing it. Because he was forcefully suppressing it, a strange flush appeared on his face. Ning Wuching raised his long sword slowly and placed it in front of his chest. He gently stroked the blade with 2 fingers of his left hand, from the edge of the sword to the tip of the blade. He seemed to be talking to himself. He said, "The sword I used in the past is called the Swimming Dragon Water-Splitting Sword. After I got that sword, I, Ning Wuching, finally achieved great success in swordsmanship. I was able to repay kindness and revenge quickly. I slaughtered the whole family of my enemies. From that moment on, I, Ning Wuching, dipped that sword in the blood of my enemies and wrote an oath. The Swimming Dragon Water-Splitting Sword is the king of the martial world. If the sword exists, the man exists. If the sword dies, the man dies." He took a deep breath and said with infinite nostalgia, "That sword accompanied me for a lifetime of trials and tribulations. I was a hero for a lifetime. With one sword, no hero in the world dared to stop me for hundreds of years. I fought Shen Xian, killed supreme martial artists, killed martial artists, and dominated the martial world. The sword is me, and I am the sword. One man and one sword, our souls fused and became inseparable. That day in the battle at the Jun family, the Swimming Dragon Water-Splitting Sword was accidentally broken by Venerable Mei. At that time, I felt that my time was coming. Or perhaps, I needed to kill Venerable Mei to erase this nightmare in my heart." Ning Wuching's voice became calm as he spoke. However, as he gradually spoke, his body began to emit a threatening and sharp sword aura. Jun Moxie knew that Ning Wuching was not suffering from a mental illness at this moment. He was actually talking about these superficial things at such a critical moment. It was not because he was reminiscing about the past. Instead, he was using his own narration to slowly recall the extraordinary years of the past, the glory of the past. He wanted to cultivate his confidence in winning every battle. He also wanted to give himself a reason to win. "Today, my second brother has died tragically. I have also come to the border of life and death." Ning Wuching slowly raised his head. His white hair fluttered even though there was no wind. It rose into the air and fluttered in the wind. On his wrinkled face, his sunken eyes flashed with a terrifying brilliance. He locked onto Jun Xia and said word by word, "Fortunately, there is still such a talented young man to accompany me on my journey. This old man will be able to have more fun on this road to hell. As long as you die, I believe that Venerable Mei will not be able to survive. If this old man's life can be exchanged for the 2 of you being buried with me, it will be worth it." Jun Moxie smiled faintly and said, "Ning Wuching, your second brother's long-cherished wish has been fulfilled. He can go on his journey without any regrets. Although it is sad, he has no regrets. You are not as lucky as your brother. Your journey to the netherworld is a foregone conclusion. But if you wish for this young master to accompany you on your journey to the netherworld, that's just wishful thinking. It's not that you are too weak. This young master will tell you the truth. Not to mention you, even if the lords of the three holy lands join forces, they may not be able to do it. Whether they can't or can't, this old man is destined to not be able to see it. Ning Wuqing smiled coldly and suddenly held his sword in front of his chest. His face was solemn and respectful as he bowed to Jun Moxie. He straightened his back and said, "This old man lost his senses just now. If young Master Jun had attacked at that time, I'm afraid this old man would not even have the chance to try and take revenge. It can be said that I owe young Master one more time. But the enmity of my brother is absolutely irreconcilable. Jun Moxie, after this bow, this old man no longer owes you anything. Life and death are determined by fate, riches and honor are determined by the heavens." Jun Moxie didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at him, almost thinking that this old man had gone mad. Just now, in order to kill Mei Shuiyan, he had resorted to all sorts of despicable, shameless, and filthy means could be found on him. But now, he was thanking the enemy who killed his own brother because the enemy didn't take the opportunity to assassinate him. That was putting the cart before the horse. When it was time to be concerned about his demeanor, he was more despicable than anyone else. But when it wasn't time to be concerned about his demeanor, he was concerned about his own reputation and elegance. This Ning Wuqing could be considered a freak of his generation. My generation can't compare. Jun Moxie. Please. Ning Wuqing's expression turned solemn as he straightened his sword, retracted his elbow, and retracted the sword. The tip of the sword brushed against his own ribs. Hidden edge. At that moment, Ning Wuqing's entire being had transformed into an invincible, peerless sword. The sword aura was overflowing, and the cold light shot out in all directions. Even his fluttering silver-white hair was like a peerless sword aura. Jun Moxie only felt a gust of chilling sword aura rushing towards him. What a sharp sword aura! It was truly unparalleled and unparalleled. The remaining 17 people of Hermitage took a step forward in unison, and the ground shook. All of them were filled with grief and indignation. They said in unison, "We will avenge our dead brothers, and we swear to live and die with Chief Ning." Ning Wuqing's upper body didn't move, and his lower body didn't move. His eyes were as calm as ever, but his aura was soaring, sweeping forward like raging waves. Finally, Ning Wuqing's aura had reached a peak. The peak of sword aura. Perhaps this was the ultimate embodiment of Ning Wuqing's peak achievement in this life. The sword aura all over his body suddenly shot out in all directions and collapsed. The long sword under his ribs actually shattered with a crack. At the moment of shattering, the scattered sword aura miraculously returned at a high speed, and gathered around Ning Wuqing's body like rivers converging into the sea. In the eyes of the crowd, Ning Wuqing was no longer a person at this moment. He was a sword. The sharpest and most unstoppable divine blade. Previously, it was just like a sword. But at this moment, it was a sword. The real unity of man and sword. The sword is me, and I am the sword. Chapter 578. Jun Moxie's indifferent face finally froze. He did not expect that Ning Wuqing would make a breakthrough at this critical moment. However, Ning Wuqing's breakthrough made Jun Moxie suddenly understand a truth. Swordsmanship. So that's how it is, extreme emotions can only make a breakthrough. Only in death can you make a breakthrough. Extreme emotions, extreme hatred, extreme swordsmanship. The true unity of man and sword, so that's how it is. Jun Moxie looked unblinkingly at Ning Wuqing, who was like a storm of swords. He stretched out his right hand and a stream of light appeared in his hand. Divine sword. Blood of yellow flame. Feeling the stimulation of Ning Wuqing's sword aura, the blood of yellow flame that had just reached Jun Mosie's hands suddenly made a zheng sound and flew up on its own, stopping in midair. The sword's body was shining brightly, and an even sharper sword aura burst forth, automatically meeting Ning Wuqing's boundless sword aura. Divine swords have spirits. Blood of yellow flame had been nourished by Jun Moxie's blood essence for a long time and had been watered by the Hongjun Pagoda's boundless aura day and night. At this moment, it finally had a spirit. Like master, like sword. Jun Moxie inherited the arrogant and unruly personality of the evil monarch. He had always placed himself above the world and looked askance at the masses. This sword naturally inherited this. Although it only had a little bit of spirit, it could not tolerate another sword aura showing off in front of it and jumped up to provoke it. Its master is the evil monarch, and this divine sword is the overlord of swords. Jun Moxie was shocked by this sudden change and hurriedly grabbed the sword in his hand. Ning Wuqing acted as if he did not see this scene and looked at him coldly. Jun Moxie, do you too have the guts to fight us fairly? Do you want to end this life and death feud? Jun Moxie had just recovered from the shock and had no time to think about what had happened to his sword. He was speechless by this sentence. What? Ning Wuqing. How dare you say that? The 18 of you actually want to have a fair battle with us? Ning Wuqing's expression did not change. Leng Leng said. That's right. If you use that kind of sneaky assassination trick, it is not what a hero would do. Jun Moxie was so angry that he laughed. I allow you to bully me with your numbers, and yet you say it is a trick. Is this the behavior of a gentleman? There was actually such a thing in the world. Before the battle, they actually set the opponent's way of fighting. Then, they besieged the opponent with their advantage in numbers, and they even said that this was a fair battle. Ning Wuqing, people can be shameless, but they can't be shameless to such an extent. I wanted to give you some face and let you die with dignity and reunite with your second brother. But since you are so shameless, don't blame me for being ruthless. What a pity. I don't know if Ning Fengyi will still be able to recognize Big Brother when he sees him later. Ning Wuqing roared. He suddenly jumped up and flashed in the air. His fists and legs were like sharp blades. They fell on Jun Moxie like a rainstorm. Because every punch was imbued with sword aura, and every kick was as sharp as a blade. It was to the extent that every single strand of hair on his body was filled with invincible sword chi. Ning Wuqing was originally an expert above the supreme level. Now that he had ignited his life's potential, his strength had increased by at least 2 times. Moreover, at the last moment of his life, he had broken through to the state of one with the sword. The current Ning Wuqing, although it was difficult for him to live for long, in terms of his own strength, he was no longer below Mei Shuiyan. In terms of damage, he was even more powerful than Mei Shuiyan. After all, every part of his body was equivalent to the sharpest sword. He could really kill with a single touch. Fighting with him alone was equivalent to fighting with dozens of sword aura masters. Although Ning Wuqing's transcendental state was only a flash in the pan and could not last for long, his damage was extremely terrifying. Even if Mei Shuiyan were to fight him, she could not fight him head-on. She could only fight him and exhaust his life force. Ning Wuqing's combat strength was not inferior to anyone in the world. It could be said that this was the most glorious moment of his life. He was the real hero of the world. Unfortunately, his opponent was Jun Moxie, a perfect opponent, a natural nemesis. Jun Xia laughed out loud, without a hint of fear. His figure became even more fleeting as he retreated at high speed. Ning Wuqing's eyes were red from killing Jun Xia. He swore to kill Jun Xia, so he chased after him. The two of them, one chasing and one fleeing, disappeared from everyone's sight in a split second. The remaining 17 masters surrounded Mei Shuiyan. Mei Shuiyan looked at Jun Xia's direction worriedly. She knew that Ning Wuqing was really in danger at this moment. He was even more dangerous than the 17 people in front of her. If he fought with her, she was afraid that even if she could kill him, she would have to pay a heavy price. So, Jun Moxie wanted to lure the most dangerous person far away, leaving Mei Shuiyan time to deal with the 17 masters. Mei Shuiyan's mind raced as she turned her head around. The killing intent between her brows instantly intensified. 6 supreme martial artists and 11 supreme martial artists roared and rushed forward. Mei Shuyan shouted and attacked first. She unsheathed her long sword and suddenly appeared in the sky like a shining dragon. Right now, they could only end the battle quickly so that they could go and support Jun Imo Xia. So, Mei Shuyan did not hesitate anymore. She did not even pause. She used the most powerful technique of the Tian Fa Forest, Tian Fa Heaven Punishing Sword. The first technique, break the Milky Way. The second technique, scatter the stars. The third technique, fill the starry sky. The fourth technique, sin the vault of heaven. 4 ultimate techniques were used at the same time. The sword light was as bright as the rain. It was like 2 meteors colliding in the sky. Thousands of dazzling lights filled the sky. Streaks of cold lightning, rays of cold light, and stars, the vast Milky Way, fell down crazily. Such a divine technique shook the heavens and the earth. The ultimate technique of the Tian Fa Beast King killed 17 of the strongest masters of the world. Only cries of surprise could be heard. No one would have thought that Mei Shuyan would actually start fighting with her life on the first move. The extremely bright and resplendent destruction sword light swept through the crowd in a split second, and screams of agony could be heard continuously. The 17 people, regardless of whether they were injured or not, all charged forward with no regard for their lives. The aura was horrifying. Mei Shuyan let out a long roar and used her ultimate move again. Her most powerful and lethal move, Tian Fa Punishes the Heavens, stabbed out violently. This move was also the origin of the name of this sword technique. If even the heavens could punish, what else couldn't it punish? Mei Shuyan's body spun rapidly and turned into a huge light pillar that connected the heavens and the earth. Mei Shuyan's body was completely hidden within the light pillar. She was 10 feet above the ground as she flew through the air on her sword. Everywhere she went, screams and the sound of weapons shattering could be heard. Countless broken limbs flew into the sky. Jun Imo Xia's figure drifted, left and right. In the blink of an eye, he had already escaped more than 1,000 feet of space. Ning Wuqing's entire body was bursting with sword energy, chasing from the sky. No matter how Jun Imo Xia changed his direction, he could quickly catch up. In his eyes, there was a kind of cruelty of a cat toying with a mouse. Jun Moxie. Run as far as you can. When you can't run anymore, this old man will deal with you properly. Don't worry, this old man will definitely end your life with 1 slash. This old man will leave 999 slashes on your body. I'll make you beg for death, but you can't. Don't you like to torture your enemies? Those who torture others will be tortured by others. Karma will not be satisfied. Ning Wuqing realized that Jun Moxie's movements were not very fast. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. He roared loudly and suddenly laughed, as if he had gone mad. Jun Moxie didn't say a word. His body moved swiftly and nimbly on the snowy ground in the forest. Ning Wuqing roared and didn't dodge anymore. He crashed into Jun Moxie. Under his unparalleled sword chi, no matter if Jun Moxie used the rocks or the trees to dodge, they were all cut into pieces by him. Along the way, they had actually opened up a wide road. There were rocks in front of him. Cliffs. There was no way forward, and death was behind him. Jun Moxie, let's see where you can run to now. Prepare to receive 999 slashes. Ning Wuqing's white hair fluttered in the wind as he laughed wildly. His demeanor was even crazier. Jun Moxie's body didn't stop at all. When he saw that he was in front of the cliff, he suddenly stopped and looked back. He smiled strangely at Ning Wuqing. Then, he suddenly disappeared. Ning Wuqing, who thought that he was about to succeed, was shocked. He turned around to look around, but did not see a single shadow. Just as he was about to shout, suddenly a rumbling sound came from above his head. Countless huge rocks came crashing down like a mountain. Any random rock weighed thousands of kilograms, and everything within a radius of several hundred feet was completely covered by the rocks. It was like a landslide. No! It was like a landslide. But how could such a landslide happen here? And how could the timing be so coincidental? It couldn't be a coincidence. Since it wasn't a coincidence, it must be man-made. June Moxie, this must be your doing. Come out now. Come out if you have the guts. The sword energy on Ning Wuqing's body shone brightly and shot out in all directions. He wanted to rush up directly. A large number of rocks rolled down. There were at least 1,000 of them. Although Ning Wuqing was strong now, and his sword energy was even sharper, he was still being smashed to the point where he screamed in pain. Thousands of huge rocks fell at the same time, and Ning Wuqing had no room to dodge. After trying his best to shatter dozens of huge rocks, Ning Wuqing was finally buried under the ground. The power of Earth. This was the first time June Moxie used the power of Earth to launch an attack. The effect was surprisingly good. A shadow flashed and June Moxie landed on the rocks. He heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet started to tremble. June Xia was startled. He flew up and hid in the air again. The mountain rock where he was standing just now shook and exploded with a bang. Countless dazzling sword lights shot out. Such a landslide didn't take Ning Wuqing's life. Ning Wuqing's current strength was really shocking. Ning Wuqing's clothes were torn and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. However, his body was filled with endless sword energy. As he flew through the air, he stretched out his arms and circled around his body, sweeping wildly. Suddenly, two extremely strong sword energy, one on the left and one on the right, one on the top and one on the bottom, drew two bright circles in the air. This old monster was really hard to deal with after his advancement. June Moxie snorted. Ning Wuqing's sword energy swept but didn't hit any target. He was about to use his sword energy to sense anything when he suddenly felt a chill on the back of his neck. He quickly lowered his head and swung his sword. His arm was his sword. Chapter 579. There was nothing behind him, there was no sign of June Xia at all. Ning Wuqing's gaze slowly swept across the area. Suddenly, he extended his body and flew out of the area of falling rocks. The sudden wave of flying rocks just now weighed more than 10,000 pounds. Even though Ning Wuqing's strength had broken through, he still suffered from serious injuries. If there was another round like this, he really wouldn't be able to take it. A gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. Ning Wuqing made a prompt decision to leave this dangerous place immediately. There was a grassland and a forest in front of him. Ning Wuqing's body slowly descended, both his feet touched the ground, his eyes were observing, suddenly his feet went soft, he did not know when a big hole had appeared in the ground. Ning Wuqing was caught off guard, his body fell down, but he immediately reacted, he fiercely raised his chi, sword chi suddenly appeared in his hand, the sword chi suddenly struck down, with the help of the recoil, his whole body was forcibly pulled out. Ning Wuqing's reaction was brilliant. Unfortunately, as soon as his body came out, June Moxie appeared in front of him with a solemn face. The sword in his hand was aimed at his eyes. Ning Wuqing roared. He raised his arms and counterattacked with the sword. But his body could not stop falling into the hole. The hole that appeared out of nowhere was at least 7 or 8 feet deep. Ning Wuqing held his spirit and chi and descended slowly. June Moxie was still outside. There would be no more sneak attacks in the hole. Once his toes touched the ground, he could jump out. This distance is not enough to bury me, Ning Wuqing. Even if you fill the hole with sand and stones, I can still rush out in one breath. But just as he was falling, another lightning sword suddenly appeared on the mud wall of the cave. This was out of Ning Wuqing's expectation. He was surprised and tried his best to avoid it. But his shoulder was still cut. Ning Wuqing was furious. He roared and slashed with his other hand. With a bang, a deep hole appeared in the ground where the sword was drawn, they were about to reach the bottom. Another strange stab. This time, the target was the back of his head. Ning Wuching only managed to catch his breath halfway before he forcefully swallowed it back down. He used all his remaining strength to flip his body over and fell head first onto the ground. However, there was still one zhang to go. As long as my feet are on the ground, I can immediately counterattack. No matter how cunning Jun Moxie is, I swear I will kill you today. However, Ning Wuching immediately panicked again. What was going on? Just now, they had clearly seen that they were about to reach the ground, but now, why was it a dark hole again? There was still an unknown distance beneath his feet. What was going on? Ever since they started falling, whenever Ning Wuching made the slightest movement to take a breath, the earth would stab him with a deadly sword at the right time. Their targets were all vital parts of his body, hoping to disrupt his breathing and cause him to be at a loss for what to do. Unexpectedly, he never had the time to take a breath. At this moment, Ning Wuching's old face was flushed red, as if he was smeared with vermilion. Even if he was an unparalleled expert with a long meridian, if he couldn't take a breath during a fight, he would also suffocate to death. And now that Ning Wuching had suffered a series of blows, it was obvious that he was on the brink. What was worse was that he was falling head first onto the ground, but halfway through, he was forced to fall head first onto the ground. He fell down like a head-on scallion. What was even more infuriating was that whenever he tried to use his arm to stab into the mud wall to stabilize his body, the mud wall would instantly turn into nothingness. It was even more unbearable. This kind of technique was definitely not something that a human Xian cultivator could possess. At this moment, Ning Wuching was finally terrified. He couldn't catch his breath for a long time, and his face had already turned purple. The fall seemed to be endless, as if it would never reach the bottom. The continuous attacks along the way had already reached 15 to 16 times. Each time, life and death were separated by a hair's breadth. Now, even if there was a chance for him to catch his breath, Ning Wuching didn't dare to breathe anymore. Because, as long as his last breath of Xian Qi was released, he wouldn't be able to dodge, and could only wait helplessly for his death. He could only continue to fall due to inertia. Ning Wuching even felt that, according to the speed of his fall, he had already fallen for at least 100 feet and still hadn't reached the bottom. Damn it, even if it's a cliff, this height should be enough. Finally, bam! Ning Wuching's entire body fell heavily on the ground, and with a cracking sound, many bones in his body were broken at the same time. His head was deeply inserted into the bottom of the hole. He immediately fainted. Because, the underground was actually a stone ground that was even harder than the mountain rocks. The fact that Ning Wuching's brain didn't burst from the impact showed that his skull was quite sturdy. In the darkness, a shadow flashed, and Jun Moxie appeared next to Ning Wuching. He laughed coldly, and stamped his foot. The rock split open, and Ning Wuching's head popped out, dripping with blood. Victory or defeat was decided just like that. With Ning Wuching's current strength, if Jun Moxie were to fight him head-on, he would definitely die. However, Jun Dashao had countless tricks up his sleeves. He led Ning Wuching by the nose, and used his 5 elements force to set up death traps one after another, making Ning Wuching exhausted from running for his life. He actually managed to drag this great expert down in front of him. The heavily injured Ning Wuching slowly woke up. After thinking for a while, he realized that he was lying on the ground. His entire body was in pain, and his head was itchy, as if there was a sticky liquid flowing out. He stretched out his hand to touch it, and felt a sharp pain. His consciousness gradually returned, but it was difficult to circulate his qi. At least a dozen bones in his body were broken, and he had lost all his combat strength. A blurry figure stood in front of him. Ning Wuching closed his eyes, and sighed deeply. He said in a hoarse voice, "Jun Moxie. Is it you?" "It's not me. Ning Wuching, it seems that you haven't lost your mind from the fall." Jun Moxie's indifferent voice was heard. Ning Wuching sighed regretfully, and asked weakly, "Jun Moxie, I lost this round, but you, are you a human? Or, are you a ghost?" He paused, and said, "Can you control the land?" Control the land. This was a supernatural power that only the legendary immortals had. This kind of thing had never happened in this world. In fact, if someone had said this to Ning Wuqing before this, he would have snorted disdainfully. But now that he had experienced it himself, he could not help but ask this question. After experiencing so many things, if Ning Wuqing still could not see that Jun Moxie was strange and mysterious, then he was really too stupid. Jun Moxie was silent for a while, and asked, "What do you think?" But Ning Wuqing took it as a silent agreement, and laughed bitterly. "No wonder you don't care about anything. No wonder you are so bold. So you have a supernatural power that can steal the fortune of heaven and earth. Such a person, it's a pity that we still insist on being enemies with you, and step by step forced you to walk the path of opposing us. You are a frog at the bottom of a well, and you don't know how big the Milky Way is. Our 3 holy lands have always treated all living beings as ants for us to protect, but it turns out that we are the frogs at the bottom of a well who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Jun Moxie was silent for a long time, and then said, "Our positions have long been clear. Even if the 3 holy lands do not become enemies with me, I will still find you in the future. You should understand what I mean." Ning Wuqing coughed and laughed bitterly, and said, "That's right. For the sake of Venerable Mei. How could you do this?" He tried his best to raise his head, but his neck was broken, and he could not. He said, "Jun Moxie. What I said today, although it was to sow discord, was also the truth. I hope that you will consider it carefully." Jun Moxie was silent. Langling said, "You don't have to worry about this, I have my own plans." Ning Wuqing laughed mockingly, and said, "Looks like I can't take revenge anymore." Jun Moxie said indifferently, "What do you think? Do you think that the current you still has the power to kill me?" "I don't." Ning Wuqing laughed crazily, and tears and snot flowed out together. He laughed mockingly, but this mockery was a mockery to himself. He laughed for a while, and then stopped, and said in a low voice, "Jun Moxie, I beg you for one thing." "What is it?" Jun Moxie could vaguely guess something. "Send me on my way. I really want to go, while my second brother can still recognize this broken body of mine." Ning Wuqing's eyes gradually became unfocused. "My brother is waiting for me on the road now, I can see him, he is waving at me." "Jun Moxie. You don't know, although my brother's Xian cultivation is high, he is timid. When he was young, he would be afraid walking alone at night. I want to hold his hand." Jun Moxie took a deep breath, and did not speak. He only heard Ning Wuqing murmur, "This road is very dark, very cold. If not for me, my brother, how would he dare to walk? He will be lonely, lonely, and afraid. I am his big brother, always his big brother. I want to accompany him. I want to tell father and mother that I have taken Fengyi back into the family. He is a member of the Ning family, he is Ning Fengyi now, father and mother still don't know." He said slowly, and the blood at the corner of his mouth slowly flowed out, and dyed his white beard red. Jun Moxie sighed in his heart. Although Ning Wuqing was not a good person, his dedication to family was really touching. "And Xiao He. My Xiao He. After being separated for 100 years, we are going to meet again today. From now on, no one can bully you anymore." Ning Wuqing's face was flushed with excitement. In his eyes, there was a tinge of happiness. However, his eyes were already in a daze. He shouted, "Reunion! I'm going home." Suddenly, his body straightened, and with an unknown strength, his dying body actually sat up straight. His neck, which was originally broken, actually twisted back with a cracking sound. With a hoarse voice, he roared, "Jun Mo Xia, send me on my way, ah! They are waiting for me, ah!" Xiao He's eyes are filled with tears. "She has already waited for me for 170 years. Don't wait any longer, ah, quick! Hurry! I beg you!" Ning Wuqing's eyes shone in the darkness, and his face was full of longing and happiness. It was as if his family was really waiting for him on the road, waiting for him to reunite with them. Jun Moxie closed his eyes, and the divine sword blood of yellow flame accurately pierced into Ning Wuqing's heart. He said in a low voice, "I hope that you can really reunite." These few days, the book reviews and comments section has not been peaceful. I want to tell my brothers and sisters one thing: we are us. We have the pride of the evil monarch. As for the troublemakers in the book reviews and comments section, there is no need to pay attention to them. I will write my novel seriously, and you guys can read it quietly. That's good. We only seek peace of mind, we don't need to care about external storms. I only hope that you guys are happy, I don't want you guys to be angry. Everyone calm down. I don't want to see my brothers and sisters filled with anger, only want to see you guys smiling. Chapter 580. Ning Wuqing let out a sigh and struggled to say, Thank you. His head tilted to one side. An expert of his generation had passed away. Perhaps, in another world, he had reunited with his family, living happily together. There was no hatred, no separation, no death, no regrets, only family reunion, peace and happiness. Jun Mo Xia took a deep breath. He felt an indescribable heaviness in his heart. He stood up slowly and said in a low voice, I am a man of many emotions, but fate makes fools of me. I am helpless and heartless. I hope that in your next life, you will not be so heartless. In this place of rest, hundreds of feet underground, no one can disturb your peace. You can rest in peace. After saying that, Jun Moxie's body rose up. As his body rose, the soil under his feet collapsed, burying Ning Wuqing's body hundreds of feet underground. A glaring light shone into his eyes. Jun Moxie had finally come out. For a moment, he felt like he had returned from hell to the human world. Ning Wuqing's words before his death had touched Jun Moxie a lot. The ground returned to its original state. No one would be able to tell that a terrifying and bizarre battle had taken place here, and that a peerless expert of the Beyond Supremacy stage had been buried here forever. Mo Xia. Where are you? From afar, Mei Shuiyan's anxious voice could be heard. A happy smile appeared on Jun Moxie's face. He raised his voice and said, I am here. After saying that, he fell to the ground. Against Ning Wuqing, although Jun Moxie had won, he had paid a hefty price. He had used all his spiritual power to support the explosion of the power of Earth, and he had used the yin-yang escape to launch a surprise attack. Although he had succeeded in dragging Ning Wuqing to death, at this moment, Jun Moxie was almost at the end of his rope. There was very little spiritual power left in his body. If it wasn't for the fact that he was worried about Mei Shuiyan, Jun Moxie almost wanted to hide in the Hongjun Pagoda to recover. After all, that was the safest place. Suddenly hearing Jun Mo Xia's voice, Mei Shuiyan was overjoyed. Just now, she had used the Sky Law Extreme technique to end the battle as quickly as possible. She looked everywhere for traces of Jun Mo Xia and Ning Wuqing, but she could not find them. She could not help but feel anxious. She searched everywhere, and was close to despair. After all, Ning Wuqing's life force was used up, and his Xian strength increased by a shocking amount. Moreover, at the crucial moment, he had a breakthrough, and his strength increased. If it wasn't for Jun Moxie who had told her not to worry and that he had a way to escape, Mei Shuiyan, she would have abandoned her opponents and followed him. But her heart was still hanging in the air. Now that she had finally heard Jun Mo Xia's voice, her heart that had been suspended in the air finally relaxed. A white shadow flashed, and Mei Shuiyan appeared in front of him. The moment she saw him, a gentle smile appeared on her beautiful face. There were more than 10 places on Mei Shuiyan's body that were dyed red. There were even some places where blood was slowly seeping out. But it was obvious that Mei Shuiyan didn't take care of her own injuries and rushed to find Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie sat on the ground powerlessly. He looked at Mei Shuiyan and said softly, You're injured. Even Jun Moxie didn't realize that his voice was filled with endless tenderness and heartache. This was a world of difference from his previous words. There was no doubt that Jun Moxie had killed many people. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was numb to killing people. But there had never been anyone who could shock him as much as Ning Wuqing did today. From being affectionate to being emotionless. Because of affection, he became emotionless. In the end, he created the greatest tragedy and regret, Ning Wuqing. This made Jun Moxie feel very emotional. Jun Moxie had never cared so much about the people around him, his own family. He made a vow in his heart, as long as my family is alive, I will make sure that they are happy. I will not let them have any regrets in their lives. The remorse of Ning Wuqing, which was worse than death, really shocked Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie wouldn't allow such a thing to happen to himself, or to his family. How can I deal with those people without paying a price? Mei Shuiyan smiled sweetly. She didn't care about her own pain at all. She asked with concern, what about you? How are you? Where's Ning Wuqing? Since I'm still alive, he's naturally dead. Don't worry, I just overexerted myself and collapsed. There's no other problem, Jun Moxie smiled and said, it's much better than Ning Wuqing being buried in the soil. Ah! Buried in the soil? You mean you've killed Ning Wuqing? Mei Shuiyan widened her eyes in surprise. In her imagination, Jun Moxie could use his elusive lightness kung fu to stall Ning Wuqing. As for winning and killing Ning Wuqing, Mei Shuiyan didn't even think that Jun Moxie could do it. More accurately, he died because of the devil in his heart. Jun Moxie thought deeply and said, he was too eager to kill me. That's why I had the chance to take advantage of him. If he had fought steadily, the result might not have been the same. Even if I had a way to save my life, I wouldn't have been able to kill him. Jun Mo Xia remembered that he had purposely run towards the bottom of the cliff. With one look, he knew that there was no path there. If he had run in that direction, if he did not have a card up his sleeve, then wouldn't he be seeking his own death? Anyone with a discerning eye would be able to see that there was definitely something fishy going on. But Ning Wuqing had lost his mind due to hatred, and without thinking, he followed him. It was because of the first landslide caused by the power of earth that Ning Wuqing was injured and his combat ability was greatly reduced. That was why Ning Wuqing was defeated and killed. If not for that incident, even if Jun Moxie used the power of earth to set up countless traps, the powerful Ning Wuqing would be able to break through them in an instant. Moreover, he would still have the strength to charge forward. His current spiritual energy was limited. He had just started cultivating the power of earth, and it was far from being as easy as cultivating the power of gold. It was really hard to determine what would happen in the end. Although he had the yin-yang escape and would definitely not die, Ning Wuqing would not die either. As for Ning Wuqing, Jun Moxie was not willing to talk too much. He asked, where are those people? Mei Shuiyan's face turned cold and she said, kill them. She tilted her head slightly and looked in the direction she came from. She said in a low voice, they attacked without any regard for their lives. I could only use all my strength to deal with them. Moreover, I was worried about your safety and wanted to end the battle quickly. In the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, I used all the best moves of Tian Fa's Heaven Punishing Sword. I used it 3 times before I could end the battle. End the battle? They are all dead? Jun Moxie could not help but stare with his eyes wide open. Those were 6 superior supreme experts and 11 supreme experts. They all died in the hands of Mei Shuiyan. Why is this girl so ruthless today? Even I didn't expect that after I got rid of my old injuries, I would be able to do things more smoothly than before I was injured. Especially in terms of speed, it has reached a level that I could not even dream of reaching in the past. Moreover, during this period of time, the progress of my cultivation is obviously much faster than before. Therefore, this battle was unexpectedly easy, Mei Shuiyan said thoughtfully. It seems that those 3 elixirs of yours are really useful. Jun Moxie laughed and said, do not be careless. This time, they only have 6 superior supreme experts. Moreover, their tactics were not good, and they were scared out of their wits by your tyrannical strength. Also, your shocking speed caught them off guard. Moreover, they did not have a leader to command them, and 3 or 4 of them were seriously injured in the June family, so their combat strength is not at full strength. You could only be so relaxed with all these factors added together. But if there is a next time, it is better to be more cautious. Okay. Mei Shuiyan gently nodded her head. Then, she raised her eyebrows and said, "This time, the elusive world of immortals really touched my bottom line. Otherwise, I would not have been willing to be so heavy-handed. After all, most of the people here are qualified to participate in the war for seizing the heavens." "You mean, they said that after we get married, we will have a child?" June Moxie suddenly understood the reason why Mei Shuiyan was so ruthless. "Yes." Mei Shuiyan's face turned red, but then paled again. She said weakly, "Xia, if that is really the case, what should we do? Wouldn't I be the one harming you? Even if we can ignore this problem and don't mind it, we still have to face it." June Moxie said confidently, "Shuiyan, don't worry. That will definitely not happen. I am confident. You just need to believe me." He remembered the legend from his previous life. When a fox lady from Liaozhai married a human, didn't she still give birth to a son? When Bai Suzhen married Su Xian, didn't she also give birth to a chubby boy? Since they were both born from a human mother, how could they give birth to a Xian beast? Besides, even if they really gave birth to a Xian beast, with his and Mei Shuiyan's genes, they would definitely be able to transform into a human form in a short period of time. It would not be a big deal. At most, they would not see outsiders for a period of time after they were born. In any case, their family would be living in the Tianfa forest in the future. There would definitely be more beasts than humans there. Taking a step back, with the heaven-defying abilities of the Hongjun Pagoda, there was no way that Mei Shuiyan would be left with such regrets. Before June Moxie understood the true abilities of the Hongjun Pagoda, he did not dare to make any guarantees. But ever since he saw the introduction to cultivation, June Moxie was full of confidence. Humans cultivate, demons cultivate, and Xian beasts belong to the demon race. Xian beasts' transformation was the same as the demon race's transformation, there was no difference. Mei Shuiyan was still a little worried. She frowned and said worriedly, "It's better to be safe than sorry. If something like that happens, wouldn't I, Mei Shuiyan, be too sorry to the June family, and even more so to you?" "Shuiyan, don't worry. I really have a way. How could I just brush you off for such an important matter?" As he said that, June Moxie moved his mouth close to Mei Shuiyan's ear and whispered for a while. Mei Shuiyan blushed first, then finally felt relieved and said, "That's good." Chapter 581. Go away, stay away from me. Don't come near me. Can't you see that I'm injured? Mei Shuiyan was embarrassed. After joking around for a while, the two of them started to treat Mei Shuiyan's wounds. June Moxie's heart was aching. There were 13 wounds on Mei Shuiyan's body. 7 were from a sword, and 4 were from a palm. Her waist and shoulders were bruised, but her internal injuries weren't serious. Most of them were superficial wounds. Even though the injuries weren't serious, June Moxie couldn't help but curse. He took out some medicinal pills and dissolved them with snow water. He also took out some medicinal pills and fed them to Mei Shuiyan. Mei Shuiyan's clothes were half off, and her skin was as white as snow. Her beautiful eyes were closed, and her body was trembling. She allowed June Moxie to treat her wounds, but she didn't move at all. Since her heart belonged to him, what harm was there in her body? However, June Moxie didn't dare to have any other thoughts. The wounds on Mei Shuiyan's body were all because of him. If it wasn't for the fact that she was worried about him, and didn't want to end the battle quickly, and took the risk of using her sword, Mei Shuiyan could have easily dealt with the 17 experts, and killed them one by one. Ending the battle quickly was the shortest, but it was also the most unwise way of fighting. If that was the case, she wouldn't have been able to bear such heavy injuries. Thinking about this, June Moxie couldn't help but feel a little heartache. Especially the sword wound on her back. It was half a foot long, and it almost reached the bone. For a peerless beauty like Mei Shuiyan, even one such scar on her body would cause a slight blemish, let alone so many of them. Jun Moxie applied the medicine carefully, and at the same time, he mobilized the spiritual energy from heaven and earth, and directed it into Mei Shuiyan's meridians, and covered Mei Shuiyan's wounds. He was doing his best to treat her. Actually, the medicine that Jun Moxie carried with him could completely cure it, and it would definitely not leave any scars. It would just take a little more time. Using the Hongjun Pagoda's enormous spiritual qi to heal his injuries was truly a waste. But Jun Dashao had plenty of capital, so even if it was a waste, it was a waste. He didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache. If the Hongjun Pagoda had a spirit, it would definitely be filled with grief and indignation. I am a great spiritual treasure in the world, but in your hands, I have become a tool to pick up girls. Mei Shuiyan only felt an inexplicable cooling sensation from her wound, and her whole body felt comfortable. It must be the medicine taking effect. Then, she suddenly felt a surge of spiritual energy from heaven and earth rushing into her body like a tidal wave. In a split second, she felt a sudden jolt in her mind, as if every strand of her hair was standing up in excitement. Mei Shuiyan was overjoyed. This was the best spiritual energy from heaven and earth for her cultivation, and it was just right for her to cultivate and purify her own spiritual energy. But just as she had this thought, she realized that the spiritual energy from heaven and earth had suddenly changed direction. It had actually gathered at her wound, and was healing it. Her wound immediately felt numb and itchy, which was a sign that it was healing. But Mei Shuiyan almost went mad with anger. This is so much pure spiritual energy from heaven and earth. I need it so badly. But it's being used to heal these insignificant wounds. What a waste, what a typical wastrel. Looks like Jun Moxie's reputation as a wastrel was not just for show. But she couldn't control it. This made Mei Shuiyan even more anxious. Finally, she couldn't help but ask, Jun Moxie, what the hell are you doing? What the hell? I'm healing your wound, I'm not playing any tricks. Jun Moxie said matter-of-factly. To him, he had plenty of spiritual energy from heaven and earth, so there was nothing to be regretful about. Mei Shuiyan almost fainted from anger. She gritted her teeth and said, You. It's such a small wound, and you're wasting the spiritual energy from heaven and earth. You. This is intolerable. Jun Moxie was a little puzzled. He blinked his eyes and said, You really need this? You should have told me earlier. If you didn't tell me, how would I know you need it? You should have told me if you needed it. At this time, the treatment of the wound had been completed. Jun Moxie thoughtfully helped Mei Shuiyan put on the bear fur coat. It had to be said that the bear fur coat that Bear Mountain bought had been very useful on this journey. Nonsense. I cultivate spiritual energy, and what I need is the spiritual energy from heaven and earth. Furthermore, the spiritual energy from heaven and earth is extremely pure. I've never seen it before. Such a rare item. You actually used it to heal such a small wound. You're really pissing me off. I can't wait to bite you to death. Mei Shuiyan said hatefully. Ah. Ha. Jun Moxie laughed heartily. This time, he had obtained a treasure. He opened his palm, and with a loud boom, the surroundings were filled with extremely pure spiritual energy. Mei Shuiyan's eyes widened. This. What's going on? This thing, I have a lot of it. Jun Moxie frivolously stretched out his finger and lifted Mei Shuiyan's chin. He said in a roguish manner, Beauty, as long as you serve me well and satisfy me, I'll have as much spiritual energy as you want. As he said this, Jun Dashao shrugged his shoulders and laughed. Beauty Mei slapped away a certain lecher's hand. She pouted her lips and turned around, ignoring him. In fact, her heart was in a dilemma. Should she let him take advantage of her? That's the spiritual energy from heaven and earth. Such pure spiritual energy is something that I've never seen before. I really want the spiritual energy from heaven and earth. I won't beg him. If he dares to refuse, if he dares to refuse, mystical beasts were pure in nature. If it was any other girl, as long as she pouted her lips, frowned her eyebrows, or showed a hint of unhappiness, Jun Dashao would immediately offer up the spiritual energy from heaven and earth. He would even have to be extra careful, however, with Mei Shuiyan's pride, even if it was someone close to her like Jun Moxie, whom she had decided to entrust her life to, she would not act coquettishly and beg him. Of course, Jun Dashao naturally knew this in his heart. Because of Mei Shuiyan's injuries, Jun Moxie decided on his own and the two of them rested for a few days. Mei Shuiyan was very touched and naturally did not object. As for the place to recuperate, it was still the same old method. Jun Moxie once again created a snow room under a large amount of snow. Without anyone knowing, the two of them used a large amount of elixirs and the most pure and abundant spiritual energy from heaven and earth to recuperate. Naturally, their progress was very fast. However, in these few days, there was a great panic in the outside world. There's still no news from the hermitage. Zi Jinghong paced back and forth with her hands behind her back. She frowned. Where's Ning Wuqing? Did I fucking slip? Although they had also suffered a crushing defeat, Zi Jinghong would never have thought that the Hermitage's army would be completely annihilated. This assumption was too exaggerated and unbelievable. Although the Hermitage's leading figure, half-bodied, was dead, there was still the experienced and astute Ning Wuqing. With only one decision-maker, it would be easier to carry out the orders. Moreover, apart from Ning Wuqing, there were still as many as 8 superior Supreme Masters and 20 Supreme Masters. With such a large force, it was impossible for Venerable Mei to defeat them all by himself, let alone kill them all. The biggest possibility was that Venerable Mei had seen that the situation was not good, and had escaped. But, where had Ning Wuqing led his troops to? Could it be that he had chased after them? If that was the case, it was not good. After all, Venerable Mei's lightness skill was unparalleled in the world. No one in the world could be on par with him. If he had escaped, there would be no reason to chase after him. As she thought about it, Zi Jinghong became indignant. Ning Wuqing claims to be an astute person, but he has lived for a long time. How could he have missed such an opportunity? Regardless of whether he had succeeded or not, whether he had won or lost, he should have sent a message, right? How could he have disappeared without a trace? This is simply intolerable. With such a way of doing things, it's difficult to take care of both the front and the back. How could he have accomplished anything great? Xiao Weiqing sat on the other side, quietly drinking his tea. He didn't say a word for a long time. In the room, there were 5 to 6 superior supreme experts, including those from the illusory ocean of blood and the great golden city. They sat with a solemn expression, silently thinking about something. This place was actually a small market. There was only one inn in this area, and it had already been taken over by the illusory blood sea. But even so, for the many of them, it was far from enough. After Xiao Weiqing and the rest arrived, even the dining hall was temporarily changed into a guest room. The group of supreme martial artist experts were like porters. 4 or 5 of them were squeezed into a room. It was a sorry sight. Brother Xiao, you mentioned before that the supreme killer, Chu Chihuan, also participated in the battle between your sect and Venerable Mei. Is this true? Zi Jinghong cursed and was angry for a while. Seeing that no one responded, she didn't feel embarrassed and turned around to ask. That's just my guess at best. Xiao Weiqing adjusted the crown on his head and answered gloomily. He didn't even bat an eyelid. Until now, he was still brooding over Zi Jinghong's plan to let the great golden city be the vanguard. Naturally, he did not treat him well. If it wasn't for the fact that he still had the illusion of killing Venerable Mei and wanted to get a share of the loot, he would have returned to the great golden city long ago. But where did Brother Xiao get the basis for such a guess? Zi Jinghong said cautiously, Brother Xiao, if it's just Chu Chihuan, of course, we don't care about him. But Venerable Mei Xian Qi is much stronger than you and me. Now, he has abandoned his hypocritical mask and revealed his fierce, cruel, and cunning personality. If he really has a mysterious helper like Chu Chihuan, it will be a big problem. We must not let our guard down. You don't have to say that. In the previous battle, it was this damn Chu Chihuan who killed many of our people. Xiao Weicheng said reluctantly, all the victims were killed with one blow. Even those who were close to him didn't hear any sound. Other than that bastard Chu Chihuan, there's no other person in the world with such exquisite assassination skills. Chapter 582. In that case, only the rumored Chu Chihuan can do it. I can't believe that a kid who hasn't even reached the level of Superior Supreme has such skills. Zi Jinghong sucked in a breath of cold air. Suddenly, he was concerned about another important matter. So, Venerable Mei had passed through your first round previously, but she wasn't injured at all? His combat power is intact? You didn't even try to stop him? Xiao Weicheng blushed and slammed the table. He stood up and shouted, Zi Jinghong, are you mocking me? If you were me, would you have stopped him? His slap on the table was so loud that everyone raised their heads and looked at him. I wouldn't dare. Brother Xiao, please calm down. Zi Jinghong hurriedly pacified them, but in his heart, he despised them incessantly. It's clear that you guys were the ones who scared the guts out of Venerable Mei and that Chu Chi-hun, who doesn't even exist, to the point that you guys lost your battle power and retreated without a fight. At most, I only said half a sentence. Damn it, even if you knew you couldn't defeat him, you should have fought with your lives. Even if you were killed, it would be a good thing for us to take advantage of it. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became awkward. At this moment, the door opened and two people came in silently. They cupped their fists and bowed to Zi Jinghong, Third Overlord, we are back. These two people were the people Zi Jinghong sent to check on the situation of Hermitage. It's good that you are back safely. How is the situation? Zi Jinghong asked anxiously. The situation is quite tragic. One of them said with a serious face, actually, we didn't find out the specific situation. But based on our experience, Hermitage must have suffered a lot in this battle. They might even have been wiped out. What? Zi Jinghong and Xiao Weicheng stood up at the same time, their faces turning pale with fright. What exactly is going on? Quickly tell us. This sentence, the two of them said almost at the same time. It was true that they hoped that the elusive land of immortals would suffer a great loss in strength. They would be even happier if the entire army of the elusive land of immortals was completely annihilated. However, if that were to happen, wouldn't the winner of this battle be Venerable Mei? And they would have to face such a strong enemy. We went to the mountain pass where Hermitage was lying in ambush and found traces of an extremely tragic battle 100 feet away from the mountain pass. All the accumulated snow within a radius of several thousand feet has been swept away. There are also a thick layer of marks on the ground that was cut by the saber light and the sword chi. The marks are about 5 feet deep. The sword marks and the saber marks are very clear. There are about several hundred places where there are obvious bloodstains on the ground. The man said slowly with a serious face. This person's name was Go Buhuan. Before he entered the illusory ocean of blood, he was an expert in tracking. Now that he was talking about the situation, it was clear and organized, so that everyone could see it with their own eyes. There are actually traces of blood in hundreds of places. Zi Jinghong and Xiao Weicheng looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. What kind of tragic battle was it to cause such a large area to have traces of blood? This battle was bound to be extremely tragic. Then, it meant that, that's right. I checked the blood bit by bit and carefully identified it. Some of the blood was bright red and had a slight fishy smell. It should be blood from the skin or limbs. Some of the blood was thick and dark red. When you put it in your mouth, it felt like it was real. Those were blood from the internal organs. Go Buhuan stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. His slender tongue slid down and down his lips. He seemed to be enjoying the taste. A few people around him had a strange look on their faces. They turned their heads away and had the urge to vomit. It's fine to identify it, but this guy actually tasted it. If you tasted it, then you tasted it. Is there a need to say it out loud? You actually said it so vividly, damn it, why don't you just say that some of the blood is blood from the internal organs? You said it with such relish. This is human blood. Damn it. What a pervert. Zi Jinghong's face was also somewhat pale. She forced a smile and lowered her eyes to avoid looking at his mouth. She asked, "Are there any other clues?" Of course, we couldn't determine it just by looking at the blood. So, I started to search for the corpses. Third Lord, I was trapped under a cliff and had no food to eat. I ate the flesh of corpses. So, I'm very sensitive to the smell of corpses. I thought that I could easily find. Before he could finish his words, a person beside him suddenly stood up with a swoosh. His face was pale. He cupped his fists and said, "Third Lord, I have some private matters to deal with. I need to go out for some fresh air. Please excuse me." Without waiting for Zi Jinghong's reply, he lifted the cotton curtain and walked out as if he was escaping. Suddenly, there was a sound of vomiting outside the door. Not knowing if it was a chain reaction, a few more people stood up and apologized with a strange look on their faces. Before they left, they looked at the guy who was making the report with hatred. They swore in their hearts that they would never eat at the same table with this bastard again. He actually ate corpses before, he's really a fucking beast. Killing. Everyone had killed before, and they had killed quite a lot. But eating human flesh, especially eating corpses. Ugh. Damn it, this is too disgusting. In an instant, there were only 3 people left in the hall, Zi Jinghong, Xiao Weicheng, and this guy who claimed to have eaten corpses before. Even his companion who went to investigate with him had slipped away at the last moment. On the other hand, Zi Jinghong and Xiao Weicheng had amazing composure. Although their faces were a little pale, their bodies were a little shaky, and even their Adam's apple was moving up and down, as if they were swallowing something, they were still able to maintain their composure. As expected of the leaders of the 2 holy lands, they were really amazing. Third Lord? Are you alright? Go Buhuan looked at the leader of his side strangely. After a long while, Zi Jinghong's face turned pale. She gulped down something and frowned. Her face was full of disgust. She waved her hand weakly and said, "You can continue. Tell me the main points. There's no need to report those unimportant things. Just tell me the conclusion." "Yes, Third Lord. I have experience, so I naturally know that when a human corpse has just died, there will be a strange smell. This smell is very special, like the smell of pork that has been soaked in water. It tastes a little sour, but it's very chewy. Especially the muscles on the thighs, the taste is the most delicious and chewy." Bam! Zi Jinghong could not bear it any longer, and suddenly kicked out, causing this fella, who was frowning and deep in thought, to tumble in a somersault. Zi Jinghong then stepped on him, and gave him a few consecutive punches. He then scolded angrily, "I asked you to get to the main point, to get to the conclusion, and you fucking kept reminiscing about the corpses. Ugh. Ugh, fuck you. Don't you have ears, or don't you have a brain? Can't you understand what I'm saying? Ugh. Ugh. As the saying goes, human strength is sometimes limited. Humans always have their limits. No matter how high one's status was, there was no exception. Zi Jinghong, who had always been graceful and dignified, could be said to have maintained this graceful and dignified demeanor for her whole life. It was unexpected that she would actually curse here today. All her demeanor was gone in an instant. Not only did she call herself, she even said it out loud, and her voice was so loud that it was as if she was afraid that others couldn't hear her. Her punches were heavy and swift. Every punch made a whooshing sound. That guy was beaten black and blue in an instant. Even the weakest person staying in this inn was a supreme master-level expert. Naturally, each and every one of them had sharp ears and sharp eyes. At that moment, each and every one of them pricked up their ears to listen to the gossip. Zi Jinghong getting angry, this was really something that was rarely seen in 100 years, why was it like this? In fact, Xiao Weicheng's face was also extremely ugly at this moment. If it wasn't for the fact that this person didn't belong to the Great Golden City, if it wasn't for the fact that he shouldn't have overstepped his authority, how could it be Zi Jinghong's turn to fight? She would have long left the north and south to fight. At this moment, seeing that Zi Jinghong was teaching that guy a lesson, as an outsider, not only did he not come forward to stop her, but he also felt very satisfied. He deserved to be beaten. This is too fucking satisfying. Go Buhuan screamed in pain, but he didn't dare to fight back or dodge. His eyes were blank and indignant. What did I do wrong? Why are you beating me like this? Until now, this guy still doesn't know what he did wrong. After a round of beating, Zi Jinghong, who had vented the frustration in her chest, finally stood up and let go of him. She took a deep breath and drank a mouthful of tea with her crooked eyes. Only then did she regain her usual graceful demeanor. She said lightly, "Get up, continue to talk. Get to the point, get to the conclusion, and don't talk about those irrelevant things." Go Buhuan groaned twice. His face looked like he had been forcefully beaten. He wanted to cry but no tears came out. Even though he was also a supreme-level master, but Zi Jinghong was his immediate superior. Moreover, he had the cultivation level of a superior supreme. This beating was not easy at all. Moreover, he did not have the chance to retaliate, nor did he have the chance to retaliate. I've searched for a few miles, but I actually didn't smell that kind of smell. He had just been beaten up, and he had a rough idea of the reason. Naturally, he didn't dare to continue to say those special words, although he still had the desire to talk about it. But when Zi Jinghong and Xiao Weicheng heard the word smell, their faces still twitched. Zi Jinghong's fists involuntarily tightened, and she stared at him fiercely. This is really strange. Every person who has just died will have that kind of smell. The smell of this kind of corpse, even if it was buried deep underground, it would still be very clear. But that area actually doesn't exist at all. I've already sniffed it a little, but I still couldn't find it. But the only thing I can be sure of is that there must be a lot of people who died in this battle. Go Buhuan said thoughtfully. He was a little puzzled. But he didn't know that those corpses were all cleaned up by Jun Moxie using the power of earth, and buried dozens of feet deep underground. With the earth as a barrier, not to mention his nose, even a dog's nose wouldn't be able to smell it. Go Buhuan's nose was punched by Zi Jinghong. When he was deep in thought, blood flowed down from his nose, and passed through the corner of his mouth. He unconsciously stuck out his long and thin tongue, rolled it up, and licked it clean. Then, he put it back into his mouth and smacked his lips. Xiao Weicheng's breathing became heavy again. He couldn't bear it anymore, but he still had to turn around. He was afraid that if he continued to look, he really couldn't help but pull out this guy's tongue and throw it out. Chapter 583. The third chapter. Zi Jinghong's eyes, which had finally recovered, became a little dazed again. She felt her stomach churning again. She tried her best not to vomit and said, "Then, what happened?" Such an expert's breathing was actually a little unstable. Even his tone of speaking was a little stuttering. His chest rose and fell, looking a little violent. Then, this subordinate searched along the way, and discovered that in the dense forest, there was actually a path that was carved out purely by a strong sword qi. Wherever the sword qi passed, all the trees were cut off at the roots, and fell neatly on both sides. Even the width of the path was the same. This level of swordsmanship is really shocking, and can even make ghosts and gods weep. Before this subordinate has never seen anyone's sword qi reach such a level. In fact, it's unheard of. Go Buhuan's face was a little frightened. Zi Jinghong and Xiao Weiqing looked at each other, and saw what the other was thinking. Tian Fa's Heaven's Sword. Based on this subordinate's judgment, that shocking sword Qi should have been chasing after someone for such a terrifying result. After a few more turns, there was a cliff in front of us. This subordinate went over to take a look, and saw that the soil on it was clear that there had been a landslide. Furthermore, it shouldn't have happened too long ago. It could have happened at the same time as the battle. That shocking sword Qi extended to here, but it also stopped abruptly. According to this subordinate's judgment, that landslide was very likely caused by someone. But the scale of the landslide was too big, and this subordinate doesn't dare to confirm it. But logically speaking, it makes sense. He thought for a while and said, this subordinate originally thought that there might be corpses below, and went through a lot of trouble to move the corpses away to check, but there was nothing below, only a pool of blood. So this subordinate boldly speculated that either the Hermitage brought back all the corpses after the battle, or the Hermitage's entire army was wiped out, and the enemy used a strange method to destroy all the corpses. Judging from the situation at the scene, the second possibility is more likely. Although his guess was not far from the truth, it wasn't far from the truth. His observation was meticulous, and his analysis was clear. As expected, he lived up to his reputation of being an expert in reconnaissance. Anything else? Zi Jinghong's face became gloomy and gloomy. Xiao Weiqing's eyes were also gloomy and even a little panicked. No, no more. Go Buhuan was startled by Zi Jinghong's tone. He had already said it so clearly, what else could there be? If it was someone else investigating, it would definitely not be like this. Why was the leader still not satisfied? But how could he, who had just suffered a brutal beating, dare to make another sound? You've done a good job with the investigation. Go and have a rest. Zi Jinghong waved her hand. Oh. Go Buhuan touched his face and nose, and looked at Zi Jinghong confusedly, which meant, you're just going to hit me like this. Since he had completed the mission well, shouldn't he be rewarded? Get out of here. Zi Jinghong was enraged, and kicked him in the stomach, sending his skinny body flying out like a rubber ball. Bang! There was the sound of something heavy falling on the ground. Then, Go Buhuan shouted, Third Master. I've done my best, and I don't think I've done anything wrong. Why did you hit me? I'm innocent. He was indeed innocent. He had traveled such a long distance and brought back such comprehensive and important information. Not only did he not get rewarded, but he was also beaten up for no reason. Then, someone outside gritted his teeth and said, you fucking deserve a beating. Everyone, let's beat him up. It was the voice of a superior supreme master who was in the room just now. Then, there was the sound of beating drums outside, dense and powerful. Screams could be heard, why did you hit me? Why? The aggrieved voice pierced through the cold weather. One could imagine a person lying on the ground, surrounded by 7 or 8 people kicking him. In the room, Zi Jinghong sat quietly with a terrible expression. Xiao Weiqing had the same expression. The atmosphere was heavy and depressing. After a long time, Zi Jinghong said in a hoarse voice, Brother Xiao, what do you think is the situation? Xiao Weiqing took a deep breath and said in a creepy voice, your subordinate's information is detailed, unique, and reasonable. Based on this, I'm afraid that the 29 people, including Hermitage Ning Wuqing, have all been wiped out. How is this possible? His voice was full of horror and surprise. Zi Jinghong raised his head and was lost in thought. How could he not know this? He was just hoping for the possibility and hoped to get approval from Xiao Weiqing, so he asked this question. Unexpectedly, Xiao Weiqing's judgment was exactly the same as his. After a while, he finally said, I think so too. Since ancient times, the 3 holy lands have always been burying the dead. Unless it's an extremely important person who needs to be buried in the Holy Land, there has never been an exception. Although the number of Hermitage's people who died outside these years is very few, there were still a few. Just like the Beast King who attacked the Tian Fa forest, there were people who died. At that time, we had enough manpower, but we only buried them on the spot and did not go through the trouble of bringing them back to the Holy Land. Yes. Especially the scene described by Go Bu Huan, there must have been people who died at the scene, and I'm afraid there were quite a number of them. Ning Wuqing's remaining manpower may not be enough. Even if there were survivors after the battle, they would only be injured. How would they have the energy to carry the corpses back? It seems that the Hermitage's battle is doomed. Xiao Weiqing took a deep breath. But the only thing I don't understand is that although Venerable Mei has always been hypocritical, she really doesn't look like a bloodthirsty person. Even if she won, or if the Hermitage's power couldn't stop her, she didn't have to be so ruthless. As long as she escaped, how would Ning Wuqing and the rest be able to catch up with her? Zi Jinghong furrowed his brows. He could not figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. Then there's... Brother Xiao, did you notice this sentence? What? Xiao Weiqing raised his head and looked at her. Just now, Go Buhuan said, when we arrived at the mountain pass, we found that there were traces of a fierce battle about 100 feet away from the mountain pass. This sentence is especially puzzling to me. Zi Jinghong furrowed his brows, and pondered hard, how could such a great battle happen so far away from the mountain pass? Ning Wuqing is astute, he is not inferior to you or me. But why would he give up the mountain pass, which is the best place for an ambush, and jump out instead? To fight head-on at such a far place. Isn't it courting death to fight head-on? If this is useful, why don't we combine our forces and kill him head-on? The reason why we made this interlocking ambush plan, isn't it to be wary of Venerable Mei's extraordinary Qinggong? But Ning Wuqing jumped out just like that. This is the biggest suspicious point. It's really puzzling. Xiao Weiqing's eyes were evasive, and he felt a little guilty. However, he knew why Ning Wuqing had jumped out to die. Because all of this could very well have been the result of him hinting Ning Wuqing to do so, if he didn't hint that Venerable Mei had been seriously injured. Even if Ning Wuqing was given 10,000 guts, he wouldn't be so unwise to jump out like that, Brother Xiao. Zi Jinghong looked at him with a deep gaze. Xiao Weiqing realized that he was lost in thought. Only then did he realize that Zi Jinghong was looking at him strangely, as if she had seen through him. He couldn't help but smile awkwardly. Brother Zi, what's the matter? Zi Jinghong smiled weirdly, but didn't continue to dwell on this issue. With Zi Jinghong's shrewdness, she could naturally see that Xiao Weiqing's expression wasn't right. Perhaps this guy had a lot to do with the annihilation of Ning Wuqing's troops. Xiao Weiqing was the first wave of ambushes, and he returned in failure. Moreover, he lost more than half of his men. With such a huge loss, how could Xiao Weiqing not be angry? When they passed by Ning Wuqing's ambush spot, how could Ning Wuqing not ask about the situation of the battle? Xiao Weiqing was exaggerating, that was also true. If it was him, he would also be unwilling to let his own family suffer such a huge loss without any gains, while the other two families were unscathed. Of course, they might not be able to share blessings, but if there were difficulties, then it would be better to face them together. However, this fellow was too despicable. He must have sent the 29 experts of the elusive world of immortals to the gates of hell with just a few simple words. It seemed that if he were to coexist with this fellow in the future, he would have to be careful. Otherwise, who knew when he would betray him? There's another thing I don't understand. It's Venerable Mei's attack. You and I both know that although Venerable Mei is ruthless to other enemies, he has always kept the big picture in mind. Towards the three holy lands who participated in the war for seizing the heavens, especially those superior supreme experts, he has always been merciful and never killed them. But this time, he was abnormally on a killing spree, not sparing any of the people from the elusive world of immortals. There must be something fishy about this. But if there's a reason, what reason would cause him to be so heavy-handed? So much so that he doesn't even care about the serious consequences of the war for seizing the heavens? Zi Jinghong pondered and asked her second question. It should be Ning Wuqing and the rest who angered Venerable Mei. and did something that Venerable Mei would definitely not be able to tolerate. This can be expected. Xiao Weicheng heaved a sigh of relief. If that was the case, then the responsibility might not be on him. This can indeed be expected. But, how can he anger her? With her cultivation, how would she be easily angered? That day, when Hermitage joined forces with the 10 experts to kill her, she did not have any killing intent. Could it be? Zi Jinghong's eyes lit up. Could it be Jun Moxie? Chapter 584. However, if someone were to hurt Jun Moxie in front of her, Venerable Mei would definitely fight to the death. But this kind of injury, I'm afraid it has to be more serious. Xiao Weicheng said with a hint of mockery. A light injury would not trigger such a terrifying killing intent from Venerable Mei. She even used Tian Fa's heaven-punishing sword, so it must be a serious injury. He might even kill. Yes, it's highly possible. If that's the case, Venerable Mei's rage can be explained. In this kind of enraged situation, she would definitely not care about the consequences. But, even if Venerable Mei has this kind of strength to kill 29 experts from the elusive land of immortals in one fell swoop, what about her body? Zi Jinghong's eyes flashed with a cold smile. She can't possibly be unscathed, right? Then, wouldn't she become a god? Of course, that's impossible. Killing 9 superior supremes and 20 supreme supremes without a single injury. Brother Z, this must be a joke. Moreover, this joke is not funny at all. Xiao Weicheng laughed and said, I reckon that Venerable Mei would at most be left with half of his life. That would be good enough. Yes, that makes sense. Right now, Venerable Mei must have suffered a serious injury. Moreover, after such a violent outburst, the mystical qi in his body would definitely be emptied. Without a period of recovery, he would not be able to return to his original state. Zi Jinghong's eyes shone brightly and said, this is our best chance. Xiao Weicheng also became excited and said, agreed. Now is the time when Venerable Mei is most likely to kill her. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, we must grasp it. So, we can only hope that Jun Moxie is not dead, ha ha ha. Zi Jinghong laughed sinisterly. Why should we hope that Jun Moxie isn't dead? Nothing is more sorrowful than a dead heart. Her beloved has passed away. She must be hurt both physically and mentally. At the very least, her fighting spirit will be greatly reduced. Wouldn't that make it easier for us to get what we want? Xiao Weicheng was puzzled. If Jun Moxie is really dead, will Mei Shuiyan still choose this path? Zi Jinghong snorted. Yes. Sure enough. However, with Venerable Mei around, unless Jun Moxie dies on the spot, Venerable Mei will save him even if he has to risk his life. Xiao Weicheng laughed. From my analysis, Jun Moxie is definitely not dead. How do you know that? It was Zi Jinghong's turn to be confused. If Jun Moxie is really dead, even if Mei Shuiyan doesn't destroy the corpses to vent her anger, she wouldn't be so kind as to help Hermitage dispose of the corpses, right? Xiao Weicheng smiled confidently and said, if our guess of Hermitage's group being wiped out is true, then the one who disposed of the corpses must be Venerable Mei. It must be some kind of secret technique from Tian Fa to be able to do it so discreetly. Brother Z, do you agree with this? Yes. That's right. Ha ha ha. Zi Jinghong laughed. But Brother Z, if Venerable Mei is seriously injured now, his whereabouts must be even more secretive. If we stay here, it's a little too. What if they slip away? What should we do? Xiao Weicheng said worriedly, you must know that such an opportunity is too rare. It would be a pity if we let it go. Brother Xiao, don't worry. Brother Xiao, do you know why I deviated from the main road and chose to wait here? Zi Jinghong smiled mysteriously. I haven't thought about this, but please enlighten me, Brother Z. Not far from here, there's a mountain range, it's very famous. As long as June Moxie is here, even if he has to take a detour of a few hundred miles, he will definitely come to this mountain range. And we will go there to stop June Moxie and Venerable May. On this point, there was absolutely no way that the plan would be flawless. I can guarantee it. Zi Jinghong smiled proudly and said darkly, as long as they come, that place will be Venerable May's burial place. Mountain range? What kind of mountain range is it, to have such a huge charm? Xiao Weicheng was even more curious. Could it be that a mountain range could attract June Moxie and Venerable May like honey attracts bees? What kind of logic was that? Tian Guan Lin. In Zi Jinghong's eyes, he could not help but reveal a hint of seriousness, and even a hint of respect. Tian Guan Lin is the place where the god of war of the Tian Xiang Empire, the general in white, Jun Wuhui, died, which is also the place where his bones are buried. It's also the burial place of Jun Wuhui's most trusted 8 white generals. That day, Jun Wuhui was ambushed, and the 8 white generals risked their lives to protect him. One by one, they died. Although Jun Wuhui was severely injured in the first attack, when he died, he was the last to die. This is the White Guard? General in White's White Guard. Xiao Weicheng's eyes flashed with admiration, sharing life and death, sharing glory and splendor, White Guard, blood cloak evil spirit, righteousness piercing through the rainbow, blood soaking the heavens, who can compare to him? So, it's here. In his voice, there was a hint of longing, and even more of a sigh. That's right. After Jun Wuhui died, he was buried here. This is the place where the famous general fought his last battle, and also the place where he left the most traces, and also the place where he died. When Jun Wuhui was plotted against and killed, his 3,000 personal guards had all retired to live here, and guarded Jun Wuhui's grave. How could June Moxie not come here? Zi Jinghong sighed solemnly, 3,000 guards. Brother Xiao, these people, any one of them would have been pillars of the army back then. As long as they returned to Tianxiang, they might not be rich, but at least they would have enough to eat and wear. But as a collective, they willingly gave up everything. They would rather guard a lifeless graveyard in this remote and desolate mountain. They guarded this graveyard for 10 years without any complaints or regrets. Moreover, they even brought their families here and settled down here. Jun Wuhui's charisma. How great was it? Was it worth them to make such a choice? After saying that, Zi Jinghong squinted her eyes, as if she was also fascinated, reminiscing about the legendary general in white. What a good man. Xiao Weicheng cheered and said, hearing you say that, this old man can't help but feel respect for this general in white. Such a person is indeed worthy of our admiration. Zi Jinghong sighed, Jun Wuhui is at best a junior to us. But he is invincible, and invincible. In the Tianxiang Empire, and even in the entire continent, he is a legendary figure. Unfortunately, no matter how wonderful a legend is, there will come a day when he falls. It's just that it's a pity that he falls, and it's not worth it. He paused and said, although I live far away from the world, there are still legends of Jun Wuhui in the illusory ocean of blood. This person's Xian Qi cultivation is not that great, but he is persevering, calm, wise, and resourceful. He is generous to his subordinates, and loves his soldiers as if they were his own children. He is kind to his people, and he is decisive in his actions. He is loyal, courageous, and unyielding. He is righteous and forthright. He is a legend that only appears once in 1,000 years. Even the generals who fought against him admired him from the bottom of their hearts. In fact, they respected him from the bottom of their hearts. Since ancient times, there has never been a commander who was able to achieve what Jun Wuhui has done. Xiao Weicheng also let out a deep sigh and said, that's right, Jun Wuhui, if you mention him, I also quite admire him. But it's a pity that such a hero died tragically in the hands of the Silver Blizzard City's Xiao family. It's such a pity. Zi Jinghong snorted and said, speaking of this matter, even this old man almost wanted to kill his way into the Silver Blizzard City. The Xiao family's actions are too despicable, vicious, and shameless. It's such a pity for this legendary commander. If that's the case, then wouldn't it be disrespectful for us to deal with his son and daughter-in-law in front of the general in white's grave? After all, such a soldier, such a commander, is rare in the world. Why don't we think about it? Xiao Weicheng's eyes flashed, and he said seriously, why don't we stop them at the foot of the mountain? After all, there are still Jun Wu Hui's 3,000 guards at Tianguanlin. If they see us dealing with the general in white's son, how can they not fight to the death? Although these people are not skilled in martial arts, and their Xian Qi is weak, they are still a force. Moreover, they are all brave men. It would be a pity to kill them all. It's even more against the heavens. Venerable Mei is not Jun Moxi's daughter-in-law yet. Moreover, we have never thought of killing Jun Moxi. After all, the consequences of killing Jun Moxi are too severe. Zi Jinghong stood up, paced back and forth, and rubbed his brows. As for the 3,000 guards, never mind, let's kill them after they leave the mountain. For the sake of the general in white, let's give them a chance to pay their respects. He let out a long sigh and murmured, Jun Wu Hui. Jun Wu Hui. To be able to do something like this in this world is truly unprecedented. He is indeed a legend of his generation. The entire continent has been talking about his achievements. Even our 3 holy lands have developed a sense of respect for a mere junior like him. He shook his head, smiled, and said self-deprecatingly, Zi Jinghong, rarely admire anyone in my life. I didn't expect that I would admire an ordinary general from Xian Qi so much. Xiao Weicheng also heaved a sigh of relief. To him, dealing with Mei Shuiyan in front of Jun Wu Hui's grave was nothing. The key was that the 3,000 guards were good men worthy of everyone's respect. He really did not want to kill such a person. Although Zi Jinghong and Xiao Weicheng swore to kill Mei Shuiyan, they were not too bad. It was just that they were more scheming, and each had their own plans and standpoints. Humans still had their own humanity. Even the 3 holy lands saw the war for seizing the heavens as their own responsibility. Although they were a little unreasonable, they had protected the continent for 10,000 years. Their merits and demerits were hard to judge. But no matter what, the merits were greater than the demerits. Brother Zi, since that's the case, have you gone to Tianguanlin? Xiao Weicheng asked. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.